on.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to Interfleet Broadcasting. It's a news, pop culture, sci-fi entertainment channel brought to you by two wise and
experienced
and senior guys that grew up watching 70s and 80s TV movies, cartoons. I'm New York Pete. This is my best buddy, Chris.
Hey there. I'm the Tipsy Toaster. We're glad that you're with us tonight. We usually broadcast every Thursday at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. But tonight was a special night. I had to work late. So everybody, everybody's got another job. So the Tipsy Toaster has to make ends meet for the Mrs. Toaster and the toaster oven and the other little toasters I have running around. So all the little appliances need their money, so everybody needs a...
That's right.
So every Cylon must have a job.
Exactly. All right, well, that's cool. I'll let you know, or I'll have you know, that George G is in the house. Lola and Jeff and Paul and Carl and Chris Marshall and who I miss, Sean, Eric, Professor, what's up? And,
probably better for them because they're on the West Coast. Most of those are on the West Coast anyways.
Lola, what's up, Lola?
Her name
How's it
was
going?
Lola. She was a
Hey,
sugar.
Mike. Mike is on. Yo, Mike, what's up, man? Thanks for joining us. Coswell's on. Hello. All right. This is cool. Thanks for tuning in live, everybody. Appreciate your support. Let's jump right in, Chris.
Sure.
And let's do the toast.
Sure thing. What do you got tonight?
I went
back to the original, huh? I don't like spiders.
Original.
I hate
It
spiders.
says. Did you see what it says?
Yeah.
Original. You said original. Original
Yep.
Sin Black Widow cider. And thank you, Super Fan Fran, for taking care of our round of drinks again today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have a new one.
What do you got?
Let's see. I have. Whoops, that's you. Hang on. Let's take me there. There I am. Oh, it's bad when I lose myself, but I have
Yeah, of course.
Left Hand peanut butter milk stout.
That's not. What is that? That's like juice or something.
Oh no, it's thick. So
Ugh.
it's 6.2% alcohol, 25 IBUs. Rich milk chocolate notes team up with peanut buttery perfection for a delicious dark duo. Sounds
Oh
like
my
Batman.
God. Okay.
Sounds like Batman.
Yes, you
Dark
enjoy
duo.
that, my friend. I'm gonna have my
duo.
cider, and thanks again, Super Fan Fran. Hey, Dorian's with us.
Hey,
Dorian, we gotta lock you down for the marathon,
Yep.
right? So you're gonna be one of our guests. So make sure that you set some time aside because you have 6 hours, and I'm gonna tell you who's been who's taken time slots. So you gotta come by. Canned Shaloub juice and peanut butter and jelly beer. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Imagine that. Oh, unbelievable. All right, let's do it.
All right, you ready? So we always
one-
toast to our fans. So here we go. 1,
1, 2,
2,
3.
3.
Excellent. Sounding good. And I'm drinking in this.
I'm drinking in the hotel bar glass.
I got Boba Fett with me, so
Yeah.
whatever.
Ready?
I win. Yeah, go. Oh,
Look at the darkness on this thing.
look at this.
Look at the
Blood
darkness.
wine.
Look at the darkness.
Look at that. Look at
Oh, look at it! Look at it fall! Isn't that
Nah, nah,
beautiful?
nah, nah.
That's just beautiful.
Yeah, just look at
Look at
this.
it as it falls down.
Look at the colors. It's beautiful. All right.
You can almost taste that picture right there.
Yeah. Ooh, it's yellow, man. I don't know. It's kind of yellowish, but
It's
okay.
brown.
Well, still sounds like the men's room. That's right, Lola. Okay. So without further ado,
Yes, thank you for joining us. We always toast the fans, and we say that the fans fuel the fleet because they are the true people who keep fandoms going. So here's to you.
That's correct. You see, you guys.
Fans fuel the fleet.
Fans fuel the fleet. Oh, that's nice. All right. All right, guys. Well, tonight we're going to talk
that's really good.
about Mork and Mindy.
That's
We have a
really
special
good.
guest coming on, and that is Mark Dawidziak, who is an expert on all things called Kolchak, the Night Stalker, as well as other characters, real and not, Columbo being one of them, and Mark Twain. So he's quite a fascinating writer. He's a journalist and a critic, and he's coming on. I'm excited to have him on. He's done a lot of work, written a lot of, authored a lot of books. So, but we also have the Tiny Bean. Tiny Bean is waiting. So let's roll with the Tiny Bean.
Uno
What do you say,
momento.
Chris?
I'm trying to fix
Okay,
Tiny
cool.
Bean.
Lola says love Night Stalker. Uh, he also actually taught university. So Mark's coming, and this guy's great. We're gonna have a good time talking about that stuff. Yes, Shazbat. We're gonna do some Nanu Nanu later as well.
All
And
right.
wrote the first great Columbo book. That's right, Eric. Hey, Tara, what's up?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Outstanding.
Excellent.
1899.
Yeah, we'll get there, Pete. I'm so excited to tell you about it.
Excuse me.
Awesome.
Yeah, I didn't make it past the first episode yet, so
Yeah, I'll talk about that. It's a slow start, but if you get through it, that slow start, it will go in directions you never imagined. So yeah,
It's not what you think.
not at all. What do you think? Yeah,
I don't know.
very.
It felt like a I don't know, Game of Thrones vibe.
Oh,
It's
The
not what you
darkness and
think.
the
I can see why you would say that, but it is
yeah.
not that at
Yeah,
all.
it's not.
Yeah.
Nope. Nope.
No, no, no. All right, Pete, let me jump right in then. I've got lots of fun
Yeah.
stuff to dig into this week. So, hello, Fleet. Welcome to Tiny Bean's Corner of the IFB, where we talk about all things new and interesting in entertainment that might be of interest to our fans. And I've got some
hmm
great stuff to dig into today. So, let's start with the up and coming news. First up, the possibly most waited for trailer of the year just dropped. Yeah, I'm talking about Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of
Woo.
Destiny. Full disclosure, guys, Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of my all-time favorite films. Indy is probably one of the most iconic characters ever, so I am very partial here. Harrison Ford, at 80 years old, is back with his hat and whip, and yes, doing a lot of his own stunts, and I couldn't be happier about it. This installment adds Phoebe Waller-Bridge to the mix as Indy's goddaughter, and the great Mads Mikkelsen as the bad guy, and it also brings back John Rhys-Davies as Sala from the original film. There's a lot of talk about the CGI used to de-age Ford in the before credits scene, and from what I can tell, it actually looks pretty spectacular. So, Indy 5 will hit theaters June 30th, 2023. I can't wait. Now, get ready for early 2023 when Netflix will drop Mike Flanagan's newest gothic treat, The Fall of the House of Usher. Flanagan is the one who brought us The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor as Netflix miniseries, as well as the screenplay for the sequel to Stephen King's The Shining, Doctor Sleep. Now, he has a real knack for interpreting some dense source material and reimagining in its well thought out film adaptations that are rich in exquisite detail. Let's hope this one will be no exception, as he is tackling one of my favorite stories by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, many of Flanagan's usual roster of actors will be returning, including the glorious Carlo Gugino, Tanae Miller, Henry Thomas, Kate Sagal, and he has stacked the deck with some of sci-fi's favorite heady hitters, including Bruce Greenwood, Mary McDonnell, and none other than Mark Hamill. So Yeah. Flanagan has said he is inspired by Italian-style horror of the 60s, emphasizing vivid colors, disorienting framing, and strong shadows, and leaning heavily into the psychological horror aspects of the murder mystery genre. So buckle up, kids. This one will not be for the faint of heart. I will definitely be along for the ride. And P.S. Word just leaked that Mike Flanagan was just tapped to lead a new Netflix version of another of Stephen King's works, The Dark Tower. So stay tuned. Now, in the film world, we haven't yet talked about the big one that is coming up this month. 13 years after the original film, James Cameron is finally bringing us the live-action sequel to Avatar, this time Avatar: The Way of Water, and it is coming on December 16th. It cost $350 million to make, and it is scheduled to be the first of 3 additional films in the Avatar franchise now owned by Disney. And by the way, if you get to Disney World, the Avatar flight simulation ride is truly worth the price of admission. But this is a gamble, guys. I mean, 13 years since the original
Oh boy.
members. Will that even matter? But this new film is coming in at the 3-hour mark and with a stunning count of over 3,000 special effects sequences. I imagine it will be quite a spectacle. It has a great cast. Zoe Saldana is back, Sam Worthington, Sigourney Weaver, Stephen Lang, adding in Kate Winslet. I am really hoping it is a hit because it sure looks like fun. Guillermo del Toro was just quoted as saying it is a staggering achievement, and all of the early reviews I am tracking are incredibly strong. So I will continue to follow this one, guys, and I say, let's give it a shot, Fleet. So now, moving on to reviews. Have you all caught 1899 on Netflix? I sure hope so.
Yes, yes,
Wake
yes.
up. This one is
Boring.
it is burning up the charts on
Oh,
Netflix with
Oh
incredible
boy.
buzz and phenomenal reviews. The word masterpiece is being used quite a bit, and honestly, I couldn't
Wow.
agree more. To dig in, this is categorized as, quote, an epic period mystery sci-fi series. So basically like all my favorite genres in one, right? Now, this is brought to us by the German team who brought us the Netflix series Dark a few years ago that I also really
Ooh,
liked. It
ooh.
seems to follow a multinational group of immigrants aboard a ship to America, all looking to start new lives when their voyage turns into a nightmare as they discover a mostly, no spoilers, empty ship in the middle of the ocean, and they decide to investigate. This series is truly mind blowing. Do not let the slow start deter you guys. It vaults into many different directions, yet it always keeps moving forward and upping the stakes. And it ends not with a whimper, but with a huge wow. Okay, the details throughout are incredible. Pay attention to the triangle motifs everywhere, even embroidered into costume pieces, the significance of certain numbers that reappear. The ships are named after Greek mythology, which is always a good sign in my book. And speaking of books, they show Kate Chopin's 1899 published classic, The Awakening, which you probably read back in, college lit. In a few scenes, they actually show this book. And that is an incredibly deep cut touch that makes sense after you finish. In fact, this is one of those great pieces of filmmaking where things may not seem to make sense or seem significant until it is done, and then you are blown back by the impact. The music touches are also incredible. Each episode ends with a different song that lends really cool depth. That's not all, folks. Fans of cinematography, CGI, and film stunts will have plenty to enjoy here. It's a veritable feast for the eyes, and apparently they use some special effects techniques that have never been done before. When you're done with the series, check out the Making of special on Netflix for a truly deep dive into the background. This series requires your full brain attention. It is very intellectual, it's not passive viewing, but I cannot recommend it enough for the serious sci-fi fans out there. Pieces like this don't come around very often, so jump in, enjoy, and as they say in the show, what is lost will be found. Now, I have an embarrassment of riches to report on tonight because this next film I will also say is being called a masterpiece. Catching up on things we may have missed in the last year, I was finally able to sit down and catch Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And I am thrilled that I did. In fact, it's almost a perfect follow-up view after you finish 1899. It too is epic, multi-genre bending intellectual sci-fi at its best, but this is also hilarious and full of heart with a cast of notables. More on that later. And they totally knock it out of the park. It almost defies description, but at its core, you are following a middle-aged woman, her husband, daughter, and father, as their life is kind of falling apart in many ways. And somehow, an interdimensional rupture occurs, threatening all of existence, and only she can save the world. So suddenly, it's everything, everywhere, all at once. And it is so much fun. This film is already the front runner for the Oscars, and it stars the always incredible former Bond girl Michelle Yeoh, who at 62 still moves like the former martial artist she was in her fight choreography. It is staggering to behold. Jamie Lee Curtis plays the hilarious Heavy, and the great 92-year-old James Hong plays the aging father. He is one of the most prolific actors ever. IMDb lists over 500 credits for him. Remember Lo Pan from Big Trouble in Little China? Or the Chinese restaurant episode of Seinfeld? Yeah, that guy. But the hero of this film is Ke Huy Quan. Now, I almost cried when I realized who he was. We talked indie at the top. Well, this is Short Round, people. And the Goonies. From the Goonies, remember? An amazing comeback story. He hasn't acted in years, though he's still worked in films behind the scenes in stunt choreography and production. He is heartbreakingly good in this film. He has a monologue towards the end about kindness that just blew me away. And yes, count on him to be nominated for an Oscar. This one will not disappoint Fleet. It's on every critic's best list of the year, and this critic is no exception. And that's all I've got for tonight. Back to you, Pete.
Oh, well, let me tell you, you got a lot of hellos from all over. Of course, let's see, Paul and Lola, and who am I missing? Just about everybody says hello, so I want to just pass that on to you. And there's a lot of back and forth little chatter here and there. I'm going to mention a show. I don't know how many of you have actually watched this. Life
Battlestar
on
Galactica.
Mars. Life on Mars with Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Oh, one season, and it is fantastic. Karen says, excellent, Tara. Karen, how are you? Thank you for watching. So,
Never heard of it.
Life on Mars with Harvey Keitel. That's all I'm going to say. If
It's
you
on
guys
AMC, you said?
have seen that. Huh?
Excellent.
AMC, right?
It is fantastic.
They just canceled it.
Life on Mars was canceled. It was only one season, and they wrapped it up. And as soon as I finished watching 1899, Life on Mars hit me. I was like, oh my God. So Tara,
That's
I don't know if
awesome.
you watched Life on Mars with the Harvey Keitel, not the original British one, but the one that was remade here.
I did.
If you
Very
haven't,
good.
you did?
Very good.
Okay, so you get it. So
Yeah.
guys,
Yeah.
oh yeah. Mike says very nice roundup of a lot of material. As always, Tara's on top of things. Tara, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate it, and of course we're on a little later than we usually do, but thank you so much, and we'll have you again soon. I hope.
It's
Marathon,
absolutely
Marathon
right?
time.
Oh,
Don't forget that the the marathon, right? January 6th, we have the 6-hour marathon. So you're
I'm
expected
so
to
excited.
try to set some time aside so that we can have you. It's going to be a Friday, right? January
Mhm.
6th, Friday at 6 p.m., right? January 6th,
Yep.
6 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be on for 6 hours. So we need you to come on, Tara.
We need
So
to
even
do
if
we
it's
need to do
late,
another,
right?
we need to do another one
Definitely.
on June 6th, so we can do it 666.
Maybe.
Six
We'll
hours,
see.
the sixth month, the sixth day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see. So anyway, we'll right. So you're gonna definitely keep that in mind.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Great job as usual, and looking
Thank you.
forward to watching some more TV so we can, compare some more notes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. I'll be in the audience checking out the rest of the show. I can't wait.
Thanks, Tara. See you
All
later.
right, have a good night, guys. Thanks.
Good night.
All right. Well, so yes, Borelli and Noman. Okay, Jeff, you better start. You need to trademark that whatever thing that you're doing there with the Borellians. And Chris, I'll tell you that Rob Harvey Keitel did that Life on Mars, plays great character in it. And if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend. I did try to watch some of the original British production of it, and I don't know, it doesn't play out as well in my mind. But it's the one I'm talking about. The American one is, of course, the remake. But anyway, now on your calendar, Lola, I think you'll like it. It's pretty cool. But watch that and then let us know.
Yeah.
1899 started out slow. I stayed with it, and I was pleasantly surprised. It's not like Lost, but it's not what you think. So yeah, there you go. Uh, Chris, I know you haven't had a chance to really catch up with
I
any of anything.
Not much. I've been kind of working, but I did watch the first episode of 1899, the Triangle one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't it doesn't
Yeah.
start to coalesce
It
till like
was.
the end of episode 3.
I was.
Um,
It made me pick up my phone and start scrolling through Facebook. So
ah, okay. I will say this though, you made an acquisition, a good acquisition.
yeah, I don't have them in my
And
hand as of yet, but
no, but it's
I've
oh
been
man,
searching for these for a while, and I finally found the scripts for the Lost Warrior. So it
yep.
is on the way. I found the script for the Lost Warrior and the actual before it was called Gun and Ice Planet Zero. It was called something else. It was excuse me.
Oops.
I was outside and smoked today, so it's
Yeah,
it
okay.
was it's getting to me. But yeah, so it's it for the Gun and Ice Planet Zero. It was called the Ultimate Weapon. So I actually have the scripts for part 1 and 2 for the Ultimate Weapon coming, and that's kind of exciting for us because I mean that's one of the ones we haven't had. So it was it was a great acquisition, and it didn't cost me too much, but somebody had put them up. He went to an estate and found them and put them up for sale. So that was great. It's great when you find cool stuff on eBay or
Yeah, and
Amazon or
and
whatever else.
this is a script that is not surfaced in
No,
years.
no, you can.
It's
There's
been
a
a long
yeah,
time.
you can go to. There's a
Yep.
script place in California, or it's online. You can get most of the scripts for Battlestar Galactica,
Yeah.
but this is one you cannot get. So
Yep.
that's kind of cool. And then
Yeah.
it's
Eric says, would love to see the script for Lost Warrior. I've never seen that one before.
yeah,
And of course, Mike says, score. Yeah. We've been looking for forever. We kind of gave up and we just went
yep,
ahead and worked on our project without having it and just kept rewatching the episode. So,
over and over
actually
and
getting it.
over.
Yeah. And over. So we're looking forward to, I'm actually looking forward to seeing
Yeah, I definitely
the
want to
script
see what
itself.
the original script had that maybe didn't make it to the episode.
Yeah, not to mention the possibility that you have, it might be an original.
It might be
It
original. I
just
mean, it's hard
maybe,
to tell. I mean,
yeah,
everybody makes copies
it's
and
hard to
everything
tell.
else, but
But even a good copy. Part one of Lost Planet of the Gods and part one of Living Legend also still MIA.
Yep.
Well, Eric, I'm gonna reach out to I think it's Chris Pappas, who was the one of the major BSG collectors, and see if we can get him on the show, talk to him, because I know that he had an extensive collection of scripts, and he was looking to trade for some. I wonder if he was looking for the same ones that we have been looking for, but I'm not sure if I got to speak to him at a convention in New Jersey years back, and he was involved with the Lost in Space Chariot, which we had talked about, and I talked to him a little bit about Battlestar Galactica, and it was kind of busy, and they were like escorting people in and out of the Chariot, the Lost in Space tank. So, but I'm gonna see if I can get a hold of him, and it'd be kind of cool to talk BSG with him, because he was a big time collector.
And then,
in the meantime,
also, I forgot to mention that also in that lot, I got part 1 and part 2 of the Tombs of Kobol.
nice,
So
very nice.
That's
Yeah.
another one that you can't find very often. So can't
No,
remember
so
the name
that's
of the
awesome.
script company, TV Scripts.
Yeah, it's the generic one. They're out there. They have a lot of stuff. They even have some of the unproduced, like Two for Twilly and one of the others.
They do.
Okay, so Jeff has an exclusive today, an exclusive reminder. He says the Imperious Leader would like to announce today is Bubbles' birthday. He has turned 102, so we toast to Bubbles. And for those of you that don't know who Bubbles is, we have to make sure that we all know who Bubbles is. So if you look very carefully at the Imperious Leader whenever he's in a shot, the Imperious Leader has a little green lizard with wings with him on his podium, on his chair. That's Bubbles. So let's toast to Bubbles. Happy birthday, Bubbles!
Happy birthday, Bubbles!
You're 102. May you never be eaten by the Imperious Leader.
Don't molt. No molting.
Yeah, we should get a nice picture of Bubbles and put him up every once in a while. Jeff, get us a good picture of Bubbles. I thought it was Michael Jackson's chip. Nope, no such thing. It's the little lizard that the Imperious Leader has. So, Rob, thanks for joining, and we are waiting for our guest, Chris. I don't know.
I found the. Whoops! Stop. It was. This is the place where you can get. Hang on. Where's my screen share?
Press all the buttons at the same time. See what happens. 1, 2, 3. Nope, nothing. 4, 5, and 6, 7.
Give me a second.
But yeah, so we are going to be, we're going late because we shifted over an hour. So Eastern time we'll be going till 11 tonight, guys. So
Here we go.
those of you that can stay up, please stay on, and we appreciate you watching live. And everybody else that watches us in rerun, also thank you very much.
Here's the scripts
Script
that are
City.
available.
Yeah, Script City is well known in the industry. They sell all kinds of stuff. I've picked up numerous.
So there's Two for
scripts
Twilly,
from
Murder
them.
the Rising Star, Take the Celestra, Crossfire, which
Yeah.
turned out to be.
Yeah.
What was a Crossfire turned out to be?
They ended up, I think, reusing it or using part of it
The
for
Pilots,
something else.
Magnificent
Yeah.
Warriors, Fire in Space, Tombs of Kobol Part 2, Colonize Planet Zero, Spaceball, Return of Starbuck. So Tombs of Kobol Part 2, I was able to get a hold of the Tombs of Kobol Part 1.
Nice. See, there you
So-
go. There you go.
So I got one.
And let's not forget, I'm going to keep plugging.
This is Galactica
Chris, I'm gonna keep-
1980, so if our Galactica 1980 fans are out there, yes, you can get Return of Starbuck and Spaceball, as well as the 2-hour pilot, missing the ending.
Excellent.
You don't get the full. You don't get the full pilot. You're missing the ending of the 2-hour. But I don't think you're going to miss anything on it, to tell you the truth.
Okay, so Rob Rob Baum is telling us now that he thinks that Crossfire is what became Gun on Nice Planet Zero.
I believe Gun on Ice Planet Zero was called The Ultimate Weapon.
And Eric Padden
But
says, I think a lot of Galactica 80 scripts you can find for nothing online. So they might be floating out there.
so
Yeah, gee, I wonder
why
why.
is that? I wonder.
Hey,
Are
it
you
is what it
saying
is.
something? But they do have the Return of Starbuck there, so they,
Yes,
and most of them are
that's
only
that's
$9
definitely
if you're really kind of interested in that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly. But that's kind of is what it is.
but
Chris,
the scripts are always fun to watch. Can I
can you
take
just
what?
make sure that we our guests not having issues getting on?
I don't see them.
Okay, all
So,
right. So you get what
who
you
are
pay
you?
for, Rob. I think you're correct. Yeah, it is what it is.
Yep.
So yeah, look. Bottom line is we have more guests lined up. We have pretty
Oh, did
much a full house
yeah, Johnny
if we can
K's
get the
coming on
guys.
soon. If anybody hasn't had a chance yet, check out
Yes,
YouTube
watch the
and look
yeah
up The Oath.
chaotic.
Yeah,
Yes, the
John,
oath.
The Oath. I'd play it, but talk about
Yeah, yeah, can't.
the lighting and
Oh,
the pictures of the research he did to make the Gotham City police uniforms.
yeah, it looked cool. It looks real.
Wow, it looks
Yeah,
so
it
real.
looks real.
It's a really good a good little short that he put together there.
Yeah, and so he's coming. We
Yep,
have
he's
him
coming
set
on.
up. Some of the authors, there's one particular author that unfortunately got, he got you know, the pandemic.
The C
He
word.
got hit with the
The
the C
the
word,
19.
post-pandemic. Yeah, the 19. He got hit with the 19, and that's why he was not on one of our previous shows. So we're going to reschedule him. However, we have others, and I'm waiting to hear from some of our celebrities, and we'll see next
You know
week,
what? I forgot to
guys.
reach out to Christopher Golden again. Now that
Oh
we
yeah,
can give him another day besides a Thursday night.
right.
So
Christopher
I'll reach out.
Golden, he promised to come on the show. Unfortunately, he only participates and does interviews weekdays and during, I
Work
believe he
hours,
said
yeah.
it was work hours. Yeah, work hours. So we're going to have a special. We're going to do a special
Yep.
with him once
Reach
we
back
lock
out
him
to
down.
him.
So just want, yeah, we're gonna let you guys know. So that'll be out for those of you that can watch, obviously live. You'll join us. We'll tell you when we get them once we lock them down, and otherwise, you can watch it in syndication once we put it up. But Christopher Golden is on the hook for us to do a Monday to Friday. We pick one of those days, and I believe it's between 9 and 5. He is more than willing to come on. So
Yep.
we are
And
going
if you
to
don't know who
bend
Christopher
over
Golden is, he's the
backwards to
one
get
that
him.
wrote a couple of books with
Richard Hatch.
Richard Hatch. So he
Yeah,
wrote Armageddon and
yeah,
a couple others.
yeah. So we want to get him on. We want to talk
We'll
BSG
talk shop.
novels. Oh heck yeah! And like I said, we're going to hear back from some of the others. As a matter of fact, we want to have an all-star cast on our January 6th marathon show. So we're going to be
Hey, we'll
we're
do some.
looking to
Maybe we'll reach out and do some trivia with Mr. Larson again if he's interested.
yeah, yep. As a matter of fact, we're going to have Fran is coming. Eric Padden. We discussed this offline, so I know that Eric is coming on. Eric Padden and our unofficial fact checker, Mr. Robert Baum, is going to pop in for a little bit, and we're going to send out individual invites. So
Times.
you
Yep.
guys, you know who you are. We want you on. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully, we can get Baz to come on for a little bit, and the usual
He's not on
suspects.
tonight,
We'd
is he?
like to have all the usual suspects to come on for a little bit, right? We got to put you all up, and remember that Mediocre Modeler will be interviewing us on the during the marathon. So he's going to have a segment, and he's going to do a simultaneous broadcast on his channel, and he will be interviewing us during the marathon. It's cool. We're going to do 6 hours, so hopefully you guys can, pop in and out or stay with us the whole
That's right.
time. But that's coming up on January 6th.
Learn about us. Hi.
Yeah, be
My
fun.
name's Chris. I'm
A lot
a
of fun.
Cylon.
Yes.
I enjoy
Okay.
10W30. Do not like long walks on the beach because the sand gets in my joints. It's no fun.
Or marches through swamps.
Marches through
You don't wanna
swamps
march
are
through
not in
yeah.
my things either.
No.
But I do find chrome and gold shiny objects very sexy. Yes.
Is that why you're wearing the gold
The gold IFB
shirt?
That's it. The golden
at
IFB.
Woo. Wow. That's a Vulpa special right there.
That's right. He was the original
Yeah.
and true bad guy for Battlestar Galactica. Before Baltar.
Yes, before Baltar. Yep.
Before Baltar.
No
Is
kidding.
that, is that like
by
a
the way,
BB? Like before Baltar, BB, AC,
yes, that's right.
AD,
Yes.
but BB before
And
Baltar.
Bubbles, I just got word from Jeff Walters, says Bubbles loves Triple T. He sent over a couple of pictures
Oh,
that
yeah.
I sent you.
Oh,
I don't
great.
know if you're going to be able to get those up.
I'll try.
So, yes, since we asked for 'em, and Jeff, I could still hear that clearly, just so you know.
Sorry, I was just like I said. Tonight has been an interesting night, and I sucked up a lot of
In your world.
smoke. Yeah, it was burning of villages for colonial villages and those kind of things. It was
As per Spectre's orders.
yes, as perspectives orders. So hey, we had to burn it down. What was it? Scorched earth theory. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't usually work, just so that you know, for the record, it doesn't work.
It's a scorched earth theory. I mean,
Mike says, cough, stop drinking peanut butter.
yeah. I need to start drinking more.
Oh, okay, it's either or, right? It's one of the extremes. You can never go down the middle of the road there. It's got to be either drink more or just stop drinking altogether.
I think I need to drink more. Maybe it'll numb my throat.
Yeah, scorched earth policy, right?
Scorched earth policy.
Yeah, so we got a couple of good Bubbles pictures.
I'm working on it.
That yes, we seen the episode Fire is in, yes, and it worked pretty well. That's right. Fire in Space. Yep. And it worked pretty well, but not well enough. Well, thank the Lords for that. And of course our Dragon Con. Oh, you got it? Dragon Con, everybody, right? Oh my God, look at that.
Wait a minute. Is that Mr. T in the background?
Never mind Mr. T, that's Imperia's leader.
Yeah, that
and
thing's
Bubbles.
amazing.
Oh my
That
God.
thing's amazing.
Oh boy. And me and silly me, I thought Jeff was just gonna get a good screen capture from, the original BSG. Instead, this are his models of, oh boy, look at that. That's cool.
He's looking at
Very
his
cool.
age,
Thank
though.
you,
I
Jeff.
mean, look at the veins in the wings. Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah, a
definitely
little
getting
bit.
his age.
Well, he's only 102.
Yeah, he's definitely seeing his age a
Yeah.
little bit.
Oh my
He's
God,
not-
look at the
his
Imperious
face
leader.
isn't graying as much, but yeah, the Imperious
Oh
leader is
boy,
just
look at that.
fracking amazing.
Yeah. Hey Jeff, are you gonna make the rest of it that goes around him, like that whatever helmet or thing is that he's supposed to be wearing around him, that Glenn Larson hated, right? Supposedly was not happy with the setup.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Oops,
all right, all good.
that was me tonight. Sorry, I was
Yeah,
thumbing
you're
through
you're
these
out of
things.
you're a little out of control, Chris, but it happens to the best of us. And let's see.
It was setting a fire to a colonial village.
Okay, I'm sure. So accommodate one. I have a couple I use. All best. Okay, so I just got a message from Mark,
Yeah.
and looks like he's coming on. You got him? Did you get
Nope.
him?
Nope, not yet.
Nope. Okay.
Standing by.
Okay. So
Red
he's
leader, standing by.
all right. He says he's on. Ooh. Hold
No,
on.
he's not.
All right. Hold on. Let's see. I'm
I
gonna
think I
let
can
him know.
Tell him to shut down and restart.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just tell him to shut down and restart.
Hang on, it's sending
Usually
reply.
works.
That hopefully is using like Chrome.
Yes. Yes, he said he is.
I see that it says sending our reply to initiate the call, but it's not accepting it. I wonder if he's got a VPN.
Oh, I don't know. He says he's using Chrome. So,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. Fire, fire. Pants on fire, Carl. Yeah, well, I was in the middle of talking about Dragon Con, so hopefully everybody is working on getting their tickets. And hey, mediocre model, what's up? What did you miss, man? We had Tiny Bean was on, and we've been talking about the marathon show.
Then we sing Happy
We've
Birthday
been
to Bubbles and
Happy birthday to Bubbles, and showing some pictures of Jeff's recreation of the Imperious leader and Bubbles.
which is amazing.
So, got myself set up for the con at this point. Eric, fantastic. Good. And I know a bunch of us, Lola got her tickets. I know Fran is going. Fran, I believe, is now overseas, hopefully on vacation, enjoying herself. Fran, I don't know if you're on or not, but hope you're enjoying yourself. And she will be back with us for sure, I think, in about 12 days or
I think
14
so.
days, something like that, or less. But yeah, so I hope it's a well-deserved vacation. Arriving in Alpha Shuttle, fantastic, Lola. We're going to have a great time at Dragon Con. Hopefully, we can get the Viper there as well. I know that's something we're working on, and we're also working on the panels. Right, Chris?
Yes.
We're going to have a couple of panels. There might be. We're going to try to see if we can get a panel on writing fan fiction,
Yep.
and since Eric Patton and Fran Severn will be there, we're going to see how that plays out. We're going to pitch it, see if we can get them in
Yep.
there.
I got to get them in
and have
touch
a
with the
panel for that.
literary track.
Yeah, literary track. So we'll see how that plays. So yeah, I have looking forward to it. The other conventions that are out there, guys, I know the LA Comic Con was, I believe, last weekend, very successful. Something that maybe one of these days we can get to. I know that I went to WonderCon in Anaheim, California, a few years back, and that was a wonderful convention. Highly recommended. There was at least one Cylon there. Yeah, at least one, possibly two. So there was a Galactica presence. It was really cool.
So
And had
it's
a
funny.
really great
It's funny.
time.
Galactica presence. There was 2 Cylons there. Oh, where are all the
Yeah.
Colonials?
They were probably destroyed by.
Exactly. We annihilated them
Yeah.
before they made it into the convention.
Yeah, okay. All right. Unbelievable, man. You and your nonsense. Let's see. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send.
What do you do? Give him number. See if it makes a difference. Give him number. Give him Tara's number.
Okay, I'm going to give him Tara's number. Okay, give me a second. All right.
See if that makes a difference. Sometimes
Fighting
that,
the Raiders. That's right. Yes. Let me give him the other numbers. So why don't you talk while I try to salvage this operation here?
what do you want me to talk
And
about? Colonials.
you need to speak.
Colonials.
Speak in tongues. Why don't you just start
Oh,
talking
no,
in
I don't
sign
do
language?
that. So, woo, my hair's all jacked up from the helmet. So, all right. So, I am out here inspecting the outposts in Georgia. Again, they just can't seem to get their crap together. So hopefully we'll figure out what their problem is. But this is what it's like being on the road. I broadcast no matter what, so I make sure I bring everything with me, as well as a shirt, as the cameras and lights and everything else, so we can always keep you guys up to date every Thursday. It's amazing. So hopefully not Columbus. Does that say Columbus, Georgia? No. Much farther south. I'm an hour south of south of Jackson, an hour south of Savannah, north of Jacksonville. So the shrimp here is amazing, of course. But that's all there is to it. So yeah, we're excited about doing the 6-hour marathon. We're excited about talking with all of our fans. It's good to see, it would be great. It's going to be great to see some of the fans on the show with us. That's kind of our idea, was to get some people that that are always here watching us. So we wanted to get you on and say hello to you and hear your story for a couple of minutes at least, and give you some screen time as well. We can't wait to do that. So that's on January 6th, by the way. If you have not heard that, January 6th. Not the 666 thing that I'm thinking about doing later on for America.
All right, so I sent out the backup code,
right.
And let's see if he can get on. I'm hoping
hopefully
he
we can.
And do you see him? Is he up?
Not yet. No, I don't even see it clicked over on the call sheet. The call sheet's connection's not there. The last one says he made initial contact, and then it said sending the reply, but the reply never came back. So the handshake wasn't working.
The handshake wasn't working.
His computer didn't want a handshake with ours.
Send him some Cylon spyware or something, and maybe that'll work.
Oh, well, we only hold that off for very special guests.
I'm actually going to text one of our VIPs and see if we get an answer tonight. On January 6th.
Yesterday's tomorrow takes place in the not-so-distant future, following Earth's government takeover to near collapse. I don't know anything about this. Yesterday's tomorrow?
Yesterday's tomorrow. Oh, Dorian, busting out books.
Oh, is that his...
Good man.
Oh, let's see. I thought he was talking about his a movie. I was like, it sounds like a movie. See, Dorian, I thought that was a movie. So it sounds like somebody needs to pick that up for production.
Oh, Enigma. What's up, Tony? How are you, man? Thanks for joining. We're waiting for Mark Dawidziak, the Kolchak expert amongst other things, as our guest. Just got back from vacation, Egypt and Lebanon.
Whoa.
Yep, that's great, man. I hope you had a great time, and hope to see you at some of the upcoming conventions and stuff, man. Especially Dragon Con. Hope you get your tickets. So let's see. Thanks for joining us. 6-hour show that day.
January 6th.
January 6th.
Did we say that before?
That's the marathon.
January 6th.
Marathon.
Hey, by the way,
marathon.
January 6th, we're going to be doing a marathon for 6 hours.
Yes.
So it's 6-6, not 666, but we'll work on the other part.
January 6th, 6-hour show, and we're starting...
And it's only a 6-hour show.
Only 6 hour.
Excuse me again.
Don't laugh too hard.
Only a 6-hour show because Pete wouldn't let me do a 12 or a 24. 24 would be a blast.
Oh my God, you're crazy.
So, anyhow, we also, I think Pete and I had talked about doing the next thing we're going to do after we get done with this next book. So we do kind of a book review thing if you haven't joined us before. So we just finished up with the, what was it, Pete? The encyclopedia, right? Or what was...
Yeah,
Yeah,
It was the
uh,
scrapbook. We just used
scrapbook. That's
scrapbook.
it.
I think I think our guest is trying to call me.
Ah, phone call, huh?
Yes, let's just go old school, man.
Yep.
Let's see if he comes on. Um, I might text him. Let me see. I don't know who this is. Let me find out. See if he leaves a message first. Oh, here we go. All right. Yep, it's Mark trying to get on again. And blue field in my own video screen there, and nothing else. And then when I tried the backup, I got an incorrect on it. So I keep trying. I don't know what's. Okay, so I'm gonna tell him to call you. I'm
Call
gonna
me?
tell him to give you a call.
Yeah, we could do that.
So
Let's see, my phone
yeah,
battery's good.
yeah. Check
Hang
it.
on. Yep.
And okay. Stand by, guys, while I set this up so that we can have, see if we can salvage our guest. And there we go, copy. And I'm going to send this to, I really would love to have him come on the show, man.
Why is
Um,
this?
let's see. Mark. Okay, so I'm letting him know that uh, he can give you a call.
All right.
Please call my technical Cylon expert at paste. And he's going to walk you. All right, so let's try that. And he should be able to take care of this. So let's see. He will get you on. All right. Boom.
See what we
Sent.
can do.
All right. At least he's trying to get on. I give him
Right.
kudos for that. That's very cool. Dorian,
There
we need to catch up on what's going on in your world. And I know that this book of yours, Yesterday's Tomorrow, so it takes place in a not so distant future following Earth's government takeover near collapse. It's told from the point of view of Elton Nett, a native of Earth. Elton was born to a working class family where he lived in relative poverty till his teens, when political changes initiated almost complete automation. The human population suddenly became jobless and society quickly destabilized. You hear that,
Sounds
right, Chris?
interesting.
You,
Yeah.
under, you understand that when things get automated, that people then don't have a way to work, that it just
No, it's when things
destabilizes
get automated,
humanity.
it's much better.
I knew you were going to say that.
It's
But
much better.
that's the synopsis of Dorian Key's new book. Dorian, of course, was one of our very first guests on IFB. So, Dorian, we got to have you back. We've screened some of the video commercials that he's actually put together for promoting his work and his books, and he also does some of the music and soundtracks. He's an accomplished music creator as well. So we need to have him back. Dorian, you got to come back. Let's make sure that for the sixth marathon that you're actually going to be coming because we want that. Plan on doing traditional. Oh, so we have a quick update from Jeff Walters, who's working on. Hopefully, you guys saw that Imperious Leader that he made. He says that he's planning on doing the traditional headdress for the Imperious Leader, but also, this is cool, also doing one where it just has his high collar in the back, like what was used for the Galactica ride at Universal, man, which is really cool. So looking forward to that, and we'll see how that. It's a 6-hour tour. Yes, Rob, that's exactly it. Thank you. So we're going on a 6-hour tour on January 6th, marathon starting 6 p.m. Eastern time, going all the way to midnight. We're gonna have all kinds of guests and fans on, and sad news about Jack Stoffer, who played Boj. I know that he's having issues or was having issues with his leg. I don't know if it was related to his knee. Carl, is there some kind of an update? and a throne seat. Yeah, imagine that. Let's say, yes, have Dragon Con Tixon Hotel. Outstanding, Tony. Looking forward to seeing you there. We're going to have a big Galactica presence. It's going to be a lot of fun. Paul Roder, Paul, and I think I'm going to do a hover around chair. Ooh, Jeff, very cool, man. Got to keep us posted on all that. Thank you very much. And yes, we'd like to talk to you about your vehicle's extended warranty. No kidding, Mike. Excellent. Let's see. Mark's Columbo book made me a fan of the show for life. My second favorite show of the 70s after Galactica. Eric, very deep, man. I know. We're working on getting him on. Stephen McCormick replying to
All right.
Eric. Patton, my son and
All right,
love
thanks.
watching Columbo together. Yeah, well, I can tell you that Mark is a no, he wrote the book, so he's a fan. I know he's a fan from reading some of his material, but writing the book, man, I'm sure that just takes it to a whole other level. So yeah, we'll have Mark on, and I'll make sure we pass on the fact that my son and I love watching Columbo together. Yeah, it's a great show. Mark, I think, can you hear us, sir?
Fine.
I
Can you
think
hear
we
me?
have. Yes, we can.
Okay, good.
Outstanding.
Okay, good.
Outstanding. Oh my God. Mark is with us. Dawidziak, Mark Dawidziak, who actually is a man of many, many talents. Mark, I am a fan of your work, never mind Kolchak. I have this to show you. I got one of these.
Oh, you
And
got
I
the
got
ancient
this.
tome.
Oh, yes. I bought this when it first came out, and it's very hard to get. And hopefully, we can talk about why it's not, hasn't been, reprinted. But that's another thing. Welcome to IFB, sir. I am a very, very huge Night Stalker fan, and it inspired this book. As a matter of fact, just so that we get this out, this book of yours, along with, of course, the subject matter, inspired me to write, and I am an author myself, nonfiction, and I also have written a historical column. I wrote for an ethnic newspaper, a national Greek American newspaper, for a year as a paid historical columnist, and that's all from the inspirations of Karl Kolchak and your work, because it's just the way, when I actually read this and put it all together, I was like, you know what, this is inspiring me to take the things to another level. I mean, I wrote for my high school newspaper and my junior high school, and that was all because of Karl Kolchak. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's
It's
always fun talking, Carl.
Oh man, and not to mention its 50th anniversary.
Yeah, that's right. Well, don't remind me of that. That makes my bones creak a little bit. But
Well, all of us. Yes, I am just right. This is another one of your works, as
mhm,
well as the Kolchak Night Stalker
right.
Chronicles. All right, and there's
I've got all these other
one
works
other
too.
volume that you actually wrote that I do have, but it's on the other shelf. But Mark,
Here's
tell us a little
here's a
bit
look.
about.
Here's a look for you.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I mean it's a variety of work that Mark's worked on, and it's impressive. And there's Mark Twain in there, and there's a book on Teddy Roosevelt, and of course there's a horror element, and I definitely want to explore a little bit besides just the Karl Kolchak and the Night Stalker. Mark, I want to delve into a little bit of what it's like to teach. I know that you were instructing on the university level. I was very impressed back in the day when I first heard about it, and you were teaching some unique classes. So I want to delve into that, as well as a lot of your writing, and then of course you'll tell us what you're up to. So with with that said, Mark, Tell us, talk to us.
Well, let me ask the first question. Where was high school for you, Pete?
High school was in
Yeah.
New York City.
Okay. So yeah,
Casper, Wyoming.
I detected, a little bit of a hometown accent there. So
Oh, yes.
I wondered.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Because for me, a lot of this story starts with like New York television because that was tremendously influential on me as a young horror fan. If it hadn't been for stations like WPIX and
Oh,
WNEW
yeah.
showing, things like Chiller and Creature Feature, all those kinds of things, I probably wouldn't have become, a term we have now. We didn't have the term back then in the 60s. We have the term now. We call people who grew up in the 60s sort of under the spell of all that. We call them monster kids. And that's not really, we were just horror fans. We didn't really have that kind of expression. And it really was the fact that there was so much of that on New York television back then that sooner or later you were going to be exposed to that kind of entertainment. My first exposure to any kind of entertainment was actually comedy, and specifically comedy teams, because in the early 60s, when I was a kid, almost all of the entertainment they gave kids was the comedy teams of our parents and in some cases our grandparents. They gave us the Three Stooges, they gave us Laurel and Hardy, they gave us Abbott and Costello. That's my earliest influence. It really is. If it hadn't been for that, I don't know that I wouldn't have gone down this kind of trail of one thing leading to another. And but at the age of 7, WPIX, good old Channel 11 in New York, showed Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I was 7 years old, and I had never seen a horror movie before that. I didn't even know what a horror movie was, and I wasn't even there for the horror part of it. I wasn't there for anything scary. I was there because it was an Abbott and Costello movie, and I knew who they were, and that's why I wanted to see that movie. But by the time that movie was over, I was a horror fan. And I think it was particularly the performance of Bela Lugosi as Dracula in that film that really fired up my imagination. So you fast forward to January 1972. I'm now 15 years old. I've been a horror fan for about 7 years. And around a little bit after Halloween in 1971 on WABC, Channel 7, in New York, the commercials started. And the commercials were for this movie that was going to come up that was called The Night Stalker. And the commercials were fantastic. The commercials were, you couldn't tell from the commercial whether it was really a vampire or whether it was, as he says in the movie, some nut who thinks he's a vampire, or whether it was an actual vampire. But the commercials were so damn intriguing. And we went through a couple of months of that. By the time early January came around, everybody was talking about that movie. It was a real must-see movie. And this was only 3 channels back then, 3 networks. So as a horror fan, I was there. I couldn't wait to see it. And it blew me away. It completely, you talk about it being influential on you. I certainly became a writer and I became a journalist and a reporter because of Carl Kolchak. It had a tremendous impact on me. And I carried that character, you showed a lot of the books. I have spent a lot of time in the company of Carl Kolchak, and I have been rewarded for it beyond measure. I can't even begin to tell you how rewarded I've been by never really leaving his company since January of 1972.
That's incredible. I actually forced my co-host Chris, the Tipsy Toaster, to watch, and
Wait a minute, Chris had not seen it?
Oh no,
Chris, you had
did
not
not.
seen the movie.
No, I had not seen the movie.
Well, now this is an interesting perspective. Then I'll ask you. You're watching a movie that's 50 years old. It has no CGI. It has no special effects to speak of. It was done on a very low budget. It was done on a TV budget for the early 70s. Given all of that, what did you think of it? What did you think of it coming out of the gate when you first saw it?
Oh, I liked it. I mean, I'm a big time like a Battlestar Galactica fan, so the CGI piece was not that big for me, but the storyline and the acting. I think the acting from I think I hate to say it this way, I think a lot of the actors that we have nowadays in regards to the CGI and everything else really fuel their acting capabilities, whereas like Carl Kolchak and the people in the movie were more actors. Does that make sense? I don't know if it makes sense.
It makes sense.
Yeah, they're more of an
it's a very
actor.
character-driven piece. You have to rely on character and character development because you don't have special effects.
Right.
You don't have this immense. You can't create a world just by imagining it. You can't create dinosaurs. You can't create another thing. So you had to go on story. This is
and I really enjoyed the storyline and the act. I love the acting. I think that's you really felt like he was who he says he was. You felt like he was Carl Kolchak. You felt the confusion sometimes that he had. You felt the wanting to be a reporter and wanting to report the stuff. You felt his drive, which I think was it says a lot for those movies back then, and I think it said a lot for Carl Kolchak.
It's an amazing performance. The Darren McGavin performance is a great. It's a big linchpin of why this works, why this movie works. And I'm gratified to say, Pete alluded to the fact that I taught for 12 years at Kent State University, and I created a course on vampires on film and television there. And we went decade by decade. What we did was we examined how the times shape how we use vampires in different decades. Nothing ever happens by accident. Vampires they cast no reflection in the mirror, but they do reflect society. So everything was shaped by what was going on historically, socially. You can look at any vampire and I'll tell you why he looked the way he did, and it was never a mistake. And you can start with the very first important vampire movie, which is 100 years ago, which is Nosferatu in 1922.
Oh, yeah.
So we would go from Nosferatu in the 20s to Lugosi in the 30s and on and on. And then when we got to the 70s, I showed them The Night Stalker. And the interesting thing was, like you, Chris, none of them had ever seen the movie. They didn't know what I was talking about. I always introduced the movie by saying you were about to see the most famous unknown vampire movie of all time. Because I'm going to say the name and you're not going to recognize it. And I mean, before you took this class, there was a very good chance you knew who Christopher Lee was, you knew who Bela Lugosi was, you knew these different incarnations in one way or another. This one, you're not going to recognize the name. And they don't. As soon as I say the name, they're just scratching heads like, what are you talking about? I thought I knew everything there was to know about vampires. I thought I had this. No, you do. Now, let me tell you something about this movie. This is why I say it's the most famous unknown movie. You didn't know it, so it's unknown. However, that when it aired, it got a higher than a 33 rating. And the rating is TV households, because back then Nielsen sold based on households, not on individuals. So a 33 rating was how many total households were watching it. And since there are more than one person in every household, the average 2.5 Americans in every household, that was higher than 1/3 of the population. It also got a 54 share. The share is the number of people, the number of people who are actually watching television at that time, because 100% of the population is not watching television at any given time. So among the people who are watching television at the time that The Night Stalker aired, 54% of them were watching The Night Stalker. More than 1 out of 2 people who had their TV sets on that night. That's an immense number. I mean, that's a number you can't even begin to it blows your mind as far as immensity of this. And then you see who is watching, because if you fast forward 20 years, the generation who watched that and grew up to make television and movies, Chris Carter, who did The X-Files, Joss Whedon, who did Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the guys who did Men in Black, all these guys were watching Night Stalker. And it influenced them tremendously. It influenced the horror field tremendously. And yet my students did not know it. So now the big question becomes, what are they going to think of this movie? Because unlike us, these are kids who are aged 18 to 22 roughly. They have come of an era that has never not known CGI, has never not known the modern Marvel movies. They have never not known any of that. How is this movie going to hold up with them? And the thing that I'm here to tell you is they loved it. It is the closest thing that I showed that got near 100% favorable response. And among college students, nothing gets 100% favorable response. This one did. When it was over, they were like, how did I not know about this? And it is because the pop culture wheel has turned so many times that, Karl Kolchak is now known by people like us, people who are dedicated to either the character or the history of the horror field or whatever. It's incredible that a movie that got that high a rating, has somewhat slipped into, I won't say obscurity, but it is certainly almost like a cult following, if you will, that follows the Night Star. It's a very dedicated group. But it's not an immense group. It's not still today. This is not a household name as far as horror and the horror field goes. So, but the gratifying thing for me was showing that movie twice a year, semester after semester, for 12 years. That's, roughly 24, 25 times I showed it. And the wonderful thing is that the magic that happened that night in January of 1972 still works. The magic is still there. And that's the amazing thing about that movie. Give it a chance. You give it a chance. And I think one reason that's so is it's a very crafty movie. And the wonderful thing about Night Stalker is you don't have to be a horror fan to like it. As a matter of fact, if only horror fans had watched it in January of 1972, it would have never put up that big a number. It would put up a fraction of that number if we had just had the horror fans in the room.
Right.
But if you look at that movie, Jeff Rice sort of set out to create a book, the original book, that the movie is based on. And Jeff had been a journalist in Las Vegas. And he wanted to write about the corruption in Las Vegas. Las Vegas in the 60s was a very mob-controlled town. And Jeff was in the middle of all of that. And he wanted to write about a novel that would reflect the corruption of the town. He couldn't write about it realistically, so he decided to write about it in that great way that horror gives us metaphorically. And so he wrote a vampire story. What he set out to do was to sort of combine two very established forms of genre. One was your classic vampire story. At the root, Night Stalker is not a lot different from Dracula. It's basically a vampire invading a major city. That's Dracula, and that is Night Stalker. Now, the city is Las Vegas, baby. It's Sin City. It's a city that's up all night. It's a city that's actually on the vampire's time schedule. It's the only city that's basically awake all night, which means it's a smorgasbord for a vampire. And it is the, it is a great city to set a vampire story in it because it's so American and it's so cynical, and the character of Karl Kolchak is so cynical. So that there is you start with that. Okay, well, this is an iteration of the Dracula story. And then you put that he was combining that with the kind of newspaper comedies of the 1930s, where, the actor like Clark Gable or Frederick March was this hard-charging reporter who has always had a quip and always had a wisecrack and was always in screaming matches with his editor. Well, does that sound familiar to you? Because that's the Tony Vincenzo, Karl Kolchak dynamic right there. Exactly. And that comes right out of the 1930s movies. Now, you add to that yet a third level. And that is that the Night Stalker works as sort of a film noir mystery. It's dark. The hero he's a reporter, but he really works like a detective to solve a mystery. The mystery happens to be supernatural. But he's acting like your hard-nosed Sam Spade, Dashiell Hammett type of detective. So all three of these levels are in that movie. You've got the classic vampire Dracula horror story, the newspaper comedy. It's a funny movie. It's got a lot of humor in it. And then underneath that, you've got the film noir detective story. And Darren had played those kinds of detectives. He had played Mike Hammer in the Mickey Spillane series in the 1950s. Right. He had played The Outsider, which was a really good, underrated series he had done in the 60s. And he had played this kind of hard-nosed detective. So he had that kind of background to play that. And those three things all lace around each other in Night Stalker. And so there are a lot of ways in. There are a lot of avenues in. You don't have to come in as a horror fan. You can come in as a mystery fan. You can come in as a sort of a newspaper comedy fan.
And a noir fan.
The amazing thing is that those elements are not in conflict in Night Stalker. They work. They work together. And that's the magic of that movie, is how in the world do you put those three things together and make them work? Well, they do work, and they work beautifully all through that.
100%. We got a quick question moving forward into the series itself. I picked up the Kino Lorber
beautiful
Blu-ray.
Beautiful
It's fantastic. Now you can actually see the seersucker. You can see the stripes, which you could never see on television. And of course, the booklet is written by you, Mark, which is really, really cool. And I enjoyed reading what you wrote. But more importantly is that episode 1, The Ripper, actually you did the commentary on it, and you played some of the interviews, a piece of an interview you did with Darren McGavin when you were researching the, I believe it was the 20th anniversary companion.
It is. It's the original book.
Him.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I flipped out because, it's so cool that you got him to quote you saying, he's like a folk hero, and it's just incredible. What was it like dealing with Darren McGavin?
That interview was done at his house in Beverly Hills. It was done in January of '91. It was a rainy January. Everything was flooding in Los Angeles that January. They had unseasonal rains, so it was a rainy night, and I had let him know I was doing the book and wanted to interview him, and he said, next time you're out here, come by the house. So, I jumped in a cab. I was staying in Santa Monica. And I jumped in a cab, went over to the house, and Kathy Brown was his wife, she's in the last episode. She plays Lieutenant Lamont in the Sentry, the last episode.
Oh,
Kathy was and he had just given blood. He had just given. He was afraid that he might be a little. So Kathy had put out a spread of cheese and vegetables and dips, and he was drinking white wine that night, and I was drinking coffee. She kept making me pots of coffee that night because, I stayed for a few hours and ran tape the whole night. But the tape I ran was your old-fashioned, Sony tape recorder.
Oh.
And it was we were sitting with a glass table between us. So when you play the tape back, it's perfectly all right for a print interview. But you put down a coffee mug on a glass table,
Tonk.
and you know what it sounds like. Yeah. And you take a knife and you cut cheese on a glass table. It was constant noise, in the background, not to mention that Darren was talking but also chewing and eating at the same time. So when I got the idea of using an excerpt from that interview for the Kino Lorber audio commentary for Ripper, I thought, I wonder if there's 5 minutes that's good enough sound to use, because if you listen closely to Darren talking, you can tell he's eating when you listen to that. Next time you go back and listen to the audio commentary, you can hear sort of the glass table, and you can hear the sound of Darren eating as well. But they were very gracious. They opened their home to me, and they let me. When the book sort of came back about in a very roundabout way, I'll explain this I'll give you the very, very quick roundabout way, is that my first book was published in 1982, and it was a piece of theater history. I had done a history of a leading regional American theater. And I had just finished that book. The book was about to be published. And when you finish a book, when I think particularly the first one, everybody asks you, well, what are you working on now? And that's kind of flattering because it assumes there's going to be a second book. That's never a given when you've done it. I've written or edited 25 books, and I've never assumed there's going to be another one. You always think, well, that's it. The train ride's done. This is the point where somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, we caught you, you're done. This is no more. But there always has been another book. But when you ask me at that point, what are you working on now? And I tell you what my next book is going to be, I'm inevitably wrong. I'm inevitably, the next book is not what I tell you it's going to be, because everybody thinks I'm the captain of my ship, I'm the master of my fate.
Master of my own destiny.
I'm in charge. But when you get to a certain age and you look back, you kind of realize you weren't in charge at all, that fate pushed you in certain places and pushed you where you were supposed to be at certain times. So when I was finishing that first book, everybody said, what's your next book going to be? And I said, I know what my next book's going to be. It is going to be a history of The Twilight Zone, because it's my favorite show of all time. And there's never been a history of that show. And wouldn't that be a great book to write? And why not me? Now, at the time, I was working at a 50,000 circulation newspaper in Upper East Tennessee. The theater that I had written about was in Southwest Virginia, just about 30 miles away. So it was very close, and it was a very natural topic to write. Nothing in my brain said, maybe Upper East Tennessee in a 50,000 circulation newspaper is not the best place to be to write a history of the Twilight Zone. It's not the best platform for getting, but I fooled myself into thinking that was going to be the next book. The theater I had written about, two of the people who had gotten their start at the theater were Claude Akins, who's in The Night Stalker, plays the Sheriff Butcher, and Fritz Weaver, both of whom had been on Twilight Zone episodes. Donna Douglas, who played Ellie Mae Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies, but is in a classic Twilight Zone, Eye of the Beholder. She came to town to shoot a commercial, and I ran down to the commercial site. So I was doing an interview here and there, enough to sort of say, yeah, I'm going to be the one. And then in 1982, I walked into a bookstore, and I had that experience that a lot of writers have over their careers of looking down and seeing the book you wanted to write. Somebody got there. And in this case, it was Mark Scott Zakri's The Twilight Zone Companion. And Mark had done such a really, really good job on that book. I couldn't even be pissed off about it. I couldn't even be angry, because I took that book home and said, Mark did 1,000 times better job on this than I ever would have done. Good for him. And it was so good that I immediately set my sights on another favorite show, which was Columbo. And a year later, in 1983, I got a job as the TV critic at the Akron Beacon Journal. Now I was in the perfect place to write a book about a TV series. I was in the perfect place to use the pulpit I had in order to gain interviews and do research. And I set out to write the book on Columbo. And I got all those interviews. It took me about 5 years, but that book was published in 1989 as The Columbo File. And it was printed by the Mysterious Press, which was owned by Warner Books. And we all liked each other, and the book had gone well. And when you write a book for a major publisher, you owe them what is called an option book. In other words, they get dibs on your next book. If this book is a success, there's always a clause in your contract that says, well, they get the right of first refusal on the next book. So you always have this conversation with editors about, okay, what do you think? Do you think there's another book what we want to do together? Well, now if you had asked me, what's your next book going to be? I'd have told you, once again, I know what my next book is going to be because we've already agreed to it. The Mysterious Press and I have agreed I'm going to do a book on Dashiell Hammett, one of my favorite authors, the Maltese Falcon,
Oh, wow.
and
Yeah.
all these, the Thin Man, and all these wonderful stuff. And this is going to be the next book. They liked my idea. I liked my idea. We had a handshake deal on it. We hadn't gone to the contract phase yet. So I knew what my next book was going to be, except it wasn't. I never have written a book on Dashiell Hammett. Why?
Not
Because
yet.
at that moment, the Warner Books stepped in and said to the Mysterious Press, you are no longer a nonfiction press. We are eliminating your nonfiction line. You are strictly a fiction press. And all of a sudden, I was at sea without the next book. In other words, I had a deal. It was all stitched up, and the stitchings came loose.
Oh, my.
And once again, at this point is where fate stepped in, and a fellow by the name of Ed Gross, who had Image Publishing in New York, small specialty press, called me up and said, I love your Columbo book. Have you ever thought about doing the same kind of book on the Night Stalker, on Kolchak?
Whoa.
And I said, I love Kolchak. But I didn't think there was a publisher crazy enough to want to do that book. And he said, I'm crazy enough to do that book.
Wow.
And that's how the book you were holding, Pete, Night Stalking, the 20th anniversary, that's how that book came about. So, once again, after, the theater book, I'd have said Twilight Zone. I was wrong. It was Columbo. After Columbo, I would have said Dashiell Hammett. I was wrong. It was not. It was Kolchak. But what happened was that book led to the novel you held up, Grave Secrets. It led to this book because Cinemaker Press, which was a small press which is no longer in business, they used to get licensing for different pop culture entities like Beauty and the Beast, and I think they had Quantum Leap for a while.
Oh, wow.
And they got from Jeff Rice, they got the rights to do original Kolchak novels. The idea was that Jeff would write the novels. There had been two, Night Stalker and Night Strangler, but there hadn't been another novel in 20 years. And Jeff didn't. Jeff was in a position where he said, I'm not really, up to writing this. So they asked him, said, well, who would you let write the first Kolchak novel in 20 years? And he said, I'd let Mark do it because I like how he did Night Stalking. So they came to me and said, you're going to write the first Kolchak novel in 20 years. And I said, I am.
Whoa.
I don't know whether I can do that or not. But I said, I'll tell you what, I'll come up with 5 ideas. 5 ideas that I think could sustain over a novel. If there's one idea we all agree is a good one, I'll do that. I'll take a swing at it. If you don't like it, you don't have to publish it. How about that? So I came up with 5 ideas. We all liked the same idea. It was the idea that became Grave Secrets. We all gravitated with that without any coaxing or pushing from anybody else. It was my favorite, but I didn't tell everybody it was my favorite. But everybody said, that's it. That's the idea. So that became that. And then that led to the Night Stalker Companion, which is the revised Night Stalking, which was done in 97. So this was done in 97, and I got to do more interviews. I got to expand. If I look back on Night Stalking, I was very fond of that book, but I don't think I did as good a job on the TV series as I did on the 2 movies. The 2 movies I thought were the great accomplishments of the Kolchak world. And I probably should have dug a little deeper on the series for that book. So doing Night Stalking allowed me to revisit the series and correct what I thought was a problem with Night Stalking. So 97, I did that. I ended up editing the Kolchak scripts that Richard Matheson had written as an anthology. Then I got to do a Kolchak short story, comic book, and novella for Moonstone. So all of this, took place going into the 2000s. And then that built up my sort of credibility in the fantasy horror world. If you just look at the first 2 books, it's theater and mystery. Kolchak sort of put me back on track to where I wanted to be to begin with. And that allowed me in 2017 to publish this book, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in the Twilight Zone. So I finally got my Twilight Zone book. It took me 30 years
Oh my gosh.
30 years after, or however many years that was. In the 35 years, I think it is. But it took me, I think, 35 years, but I finally got my Twilight Zone book. But this was the Twilight Zone book I was meant to write. You know, I was not ready to write that Twilight Zone book in the early 80s. After I had done Night Stalker, after I had done all that Kolchak work, written a book on Dracula, written some fiction, sort of built up my credentials a little bit in the horror field, it was then that the universe said, okay, now you're ready. And it was because I was sharing the series with my daughter. My daughter loves classic television. She loved, and I didn't push her. You can't push kids to like something that that you like. You know, they have to discover it on their own, and she did. So she loves, you know, the Dick Van Dyke Show. I love
my
Lucy,
gosh, great show.
The Andy Griffith Show, Columbo. Yes. She loved Columbo, but she watched all of Night Gallery. She had watched all of the Night Gallery, the later Rod Serling series, the horror series. But when she turned around 14, 15, thereabouts, I said to her, you know, you kind of finish your undergraduate work in classic television. It's time to work on your graduate work. It's time for you to enter the Twilight Zone. So we just decided to do a forced march through all 156 episodes.
Woo.
We started with the pilot, Where Is Everybody? And we worked our way all the way through every single episode. Sometimes we would watch like 2 or 3 in an evening, sometimes just one. But, you know, it took us, you know, a few months to do it, but we got through all the episodes. But very early on, it was in like the first season. There's an episode called Escape Clause with David Wayne, and he plays a hypochondriac named Walter Bedecker. And Walter Bedecker is only interested in Walter Bedecker. And he is constantly worried about his health, and he makes a deal with the devil. The devil appears and offers him a
I remember
contract.
this episode now. Yeah.
And he offers him immortality, but there's an escape clause. At any point, you know, he can call the devil to call off the deal, and the devil will claim his soul at that point. And Walter Bedecker basically thinks, I'm never going to use the escape clause. The devil has just signed a bad bargain. Well, anybody who's ever seen a Twilight Zone episode knows this is not going to end well for Walter Bedecker. We know this. And of course, the episode runs its course, and it doesn't. And at that point, I turned to my daughter jokingly, and I waved a finger at her. I said, you just let that be a lesson to you. You know, always read contracts carefully. Always consider the consequences. Always read every clause. You know, and I was kidding, and, you know, we kind of laughed about it. And then I thought to myself, now, wait. Let's go back to the financial crisis of 2008 and all those bad contracts that people signed, all those mortgages that people signed, that if they actually had read what they were signing, think of the pain
balloon,
we all would have been spared. So I turned back to my daughter and I said, you know, I'm kind of serious about this. I know I was kidding, but now I'm serious. Well, we watched the next few episodes, and after every episode, this became a running gag. I would, you know, no matter how the episode ended, I would look at Becky and say, let that be a lesson to you, you know, and I can run a gag around with the best of them. So, you know, after a couple of weeks of this, the penny finally dropped in my head and said, well, that's it, stupid. That's your book. Every one of these Twilight Zones is indeed a life lesson. Every one of them's a parable. Every one of them is a morality tale. All you need to do is extract the morality tales out of this and frame it as a self-help book. Everything I need to know, I learned in the Twilight Zone, and it's sincere. And that became the book. That's what became that book. It's 50 life lessons drawn from the Twilight Zone. So if it hadn't been for Carl Kolchak, I don't think I would have ever gotten to the Twilight Zone. You know? So that's just one example of, and it's also an example of again, how you think you're calling the shots and how you think you're in charge, and you really aren't, you know. I remember, you know, the actor Brian Dennehy, wonderful actor, and there was a point in his career where Dennehy was doing Broadway. He was doing A Long Day's Journey to Night and Death of a Salesman on Broadway. He was doing great movies like Cocoon and things like that. And he was doing great television movies and miniseries. And he had this like 3-tiered career going, and it was just wonderful. And I remember interviewing him around this time and saying, how do you plan a career like that? And he laughed. He just laughed. He said, plan it.
Plan that.
He said, I'm an actor. That's like asking somebody falling down a flight of stairs what their plan is. I thought it was a great line. I thought it was a great line. That's what we're doing. We're all falling down flights of stairs, and you're just trying to figure out to get to the bottom without hurting yourself too badly. You're improvising. Life is just throwing this at you, and you're negotiating how you're going. So I thought that was a great line, and I've borrowed it a lot because I've often thought that's what I've been doing. I've been falling down a flight of stairs. So
wow.
Anyway. That's the long. I said that was going to be a short story. It wasn't. It was a long story.
That's good though.
No,
it's a good
that's
story.
awesome. It's a great story.
Most good stories are not short stories.
That's exactly true. We had a question from our very own news anchor, John One, who had reached out to you. He wanted to know, in your opinion, which was the most controversial Kolchak episode, in your opinion?
Controversial. The word almost doesn't apply because once you get into the series was a disaster. The series was a failure. The series only lasted 20 episodes, and it was on Friday nights when ABC was in the toilet in the ratings. They were the third-rated network at the time. They're very quickly going to emerge in the 70s and become the number one network. They're going to go there on what was called Jiggle Television, exploitation, Charlie's Angels, The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, Three's Company. Those shows are going to propel ABC to number one. But in the early, when Night Stalker premiered in September of 1974, ABC was deep in the third place. And Night Stalker aired on Friday nights when NBC owned Friday nights. NBC had the number one and number two show in the country that season. The number one and number two show were Chico and the Man and Sanford and Son, and they were both on Friday nights. So, Night Stalker was a disaster from a rating standpoint. It had no real audience to speak of. It took a long hiatus, and Darren was unhappy doing the series because ABC had done the two original movies. The Night Stalker, which aired in January of 72, and The Night Strangler, which aired in January of 73. At the end of Night Strangler, Dan Curtis, the producer and director, and Darren got into a major fight. They got into a big fight and wanted to work with each other. Oh, yeah. But Dan, I actually knew Dan, got to know Dan better than I knew Darren. And Dan was a brawler of the first magnitude. Dan looked and talked like a New York longshoreman. He's the last person you would have thought was like a film producer. Dan could not talk. He could not string together two sentences without like 7 profanities over those 2 sentences. In places where you never would have guessed put profanity. You'd say, like, who puts profanity there? Who says that way? After a while, you didn't even hear it anymore because it became it's just the way Dan talked. Dan was a great storyteller, just marvelous. But sitting behind a desk talking, Dan was just great. He was a great storyteller filmically, too. But Dan and Darren were both sort of alpha males. And in the first movie, Dan didn't direct it. A fellow by the name of John Llewellyn Moxey, who was a very genial Englishman who believed in having happy sets, directed the first movie. Dan wanted to direct, but he produced instead. He had done Dark Shadows, and they brought him in to produce it. When the second film was made, Dan made sure he was in the director's chair. And Dan and Darren had gotten along great on Night Stalker. They did not get along so great on Night Strangler. And there were two yard dogs yapping at each other, and it blew up at the last night of filming. And Darren walked out, and they didn't talk for a long time. They patched it up later on, but they did not talk for a long time. So there was going to be a third movie called The Night Killers, which would have aired in January of 74. And the script was actually written by Richard Matheson and William F. Nolan.
Ooh, that'd be fun
it was going to be
read.
set in Hawaii. And it was actually a very interesting story because, 20 years later, Chris Carter would tell anybody who asked him, even people who didn't ask him, he would tell them that he did the X-Files because as a kid, the Night Stalker had scared the hell out of him. And so he wanted to do his generation's version of the Night Stalker. And the interesting thing about that third movie is it's the most X-Files-like story that was ever written for Carl, and they never shot it. Nobody ever got a chance to see it. So it didn't get a chance to influence Chris Carter. But it was about aliens, replicants, and it was all this stuff that was right out of the X-Files.
I wonder if that's available somewhere to read.
It is. Well, I did it's hard to find, and it's very expensive if you find it, but I did a collection called Richard Matheson's Kolchak scripts, and the entire script is in that collection.
It's nearly impossible to get. Oh, yeah,
it's
so
very expensive if you find it. Yeah. There was a limited run. Go ahead.
It reminds me of Westworld.
Ooh.
Yeah, there is a little bit of that in that, and again, there was also aliens, so it had that sort of aspect of later on with the X-Files. But subsequently, the third movie was never made, and then the talk shifted to doing a series instead of another movie. And Universal wanted to do the series, so Universal licensed the property from ABC, and it aired on ABC, but Universal made the episodes. Darren agreed to do it, but only on the condition that he could produce it as well, And at the last second, Universal got cold feet and reneged, and they put one of their own producers in charge. This created a dynamic that doomed the Night Stalker from the start, because Darren and whatever producer they paired him, there were two producers. Paul Playton at first, who did the first 4 episodes. Darren and Paul did not get along. And then they brought in Cy Shermack, and Cy and Darren didn't get along. And there was like 2 armed camps. There was the producers, the writer's room that the producer oversaw, and then down on the set, Darren was acting like he was the producer, but he wasn't. He didn't have the title, but he was acting like he was. And so you had this kind of eternal pushing and shoving match. It was not only on the third-rated network. Night Stalker was also kind of treated like the poor stepchild on the Universal lot. Universal did a lot of television back then, and there was a real hierarchy to what you worked on. And the highest end show at that time was another show I'd written a book about. It was Columbo. Columbo was like the one winning the Emmys. It was crucially important to NBC to have it. It nailed down the mystery movie for them. It was an incredibly important show to them, and it was a high prestige show. And then you worked your way down the McCloud, McMillan and Wife, and you worked your way down to all the shows that Universal was making at the time. And at the very bottom was Night Stalker. And so the high-end writers weren't interested in working on Night Stalker. Not to mention the fact that it was a horror show, and it's tough to write horror. It's one of the toughest forms to write. So, one of the things about this show is it's kind of incredible that so many episodes turned out as well as they did, considering that the production company was a war zone because of Darren and whoever producer not getting along and fighting. But there was a young group of writers, and they were just starting their careers, who gravitated towards the show because they could sell to it. So the story editor was a young guy by the name of David Chase, who's going to go on to create The Sopranos.
Oh, wow.
He was in charge of the show, really, as far as the writing team. He was the story editor. And then Michael Kozel was another writer who worked on the show. He's going to go on to co-create Hill Street Blues with Stephen Bochco.
Wow.
And another writer who made his first sale, a professional sale of any kind, to Night Stalker was a young writer by the name of Bob Zemeckis, who's going to go on to do Forrest Gump, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So you had this kind of funky group of writers who gravitated towards the show and wrote, and in some ways the show stands up better as a comedy than it does a horror show. The element of comedy that was in the very first movie was exaggerated in the second movie and then went through the roof for the series. They actually structured it like a sitcom. They structured a family instead of it was a work family. And Tony was like the long-suffering father. Then Miss Emily was like the kindly grandmother or aunt. Ron was like the know-it-all brother who was always telling, and Darren was the bad boy brother who was always getting into trouble. So they kind of structured it like a sitcom in many, many ways. And it's a very funky series. It has a lot of delightful qualities. It's always wonderful to watch Darren in that seersucker suit and those white sneakers. He always makes that character get up and dance. But very few of those episodes really rise to the level of what that first movie was. There's one. The Horror in the Heights is a very good episode. Excellent episode. And one of the reasons was it was the only episode that was actually written by an actual horror writer with horror credits. Jimmy Sangster, the Hammer horror film veteran, who had written Curse of Frankenstein and Horror of Dracula with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. He had written, many of the great Hammer horror films. He wrote Horror in the Heights, and it shows. It really that one sort of charts up over and above. But because the show is so obscure, it didn't really get a chance to be controversial. There's not an episode there because nobody was really watching or caring. The most controversial thing about it was just the fact that Darren wanted out. After 20 episodes, they had a commitment of 24 episodes, which was cut to 22, and then at 20 episodes, Darren went to Universal and said, "I'm not having any fun.
Oh no,
let's cancel this thing." And Universal said, "Well, we can't cancel it outright. ABC has to," and he said, so he went to ABC and he said to ABC, "Cancel this sucker." And ABC said, "Well, Universal," and he finally said, "Look, will you two guys get together and cancel this?" And by the end of the day, he got the phone call that he was waiting for, that he was free. And that's what he wanted.
Oh my gosh.
So, I have to say this, you asked about, interviewing Darren, and Darren was nothing but candid. You wanted an honest answer, you got one when you asked Darren a question. Darren didn't like the series. Now, fans of Kolchak don't want to hear that. It's not a very pleasant thing to hear, but Darren was not fond of the series at all. He didn't even like the second movie very much. He liked the first movie. He thought the first movie was original, fresh, dynamic. He loved that original movie, and he thought everything else was just going around the same barn over and over again. So he had nothing much good to say about either the second movie or the series. And again, fans of the character don't really like to hear that, but it's the truth. He didn't like it very much, and he wasn't fond of it. But he talked forever about how wonderful the first movie was, and the experience of making the first. He had a blast making that first movie. He really enjoyed himself.
Mark, did you ever get the sense from Darren whether or not he ever embraced the idea that his character had influenced a lot of people in the right way?
Oh yeah. Oh, I don't think he was as aware of it. But if you listen to that, you mentioned the 5-minute or so snippet of the interview with Darren that I put on the audio commentary. I was so glad to find that. I was so glad 5 minutes that were a good 5 minutes and that sounded good enough to use on the audio commentary. When I found it, I was said, well, okay, this is the magic 5 minutes. This is what we're going to put in there, and I didn't tell anybody I was going to do it. I wanted people to find it like you did, by surprise. And I know one Kolchak fan said, when you were setting it up, I said, he's not going to. He is, and that is exactly the appeal I was going for.
Yeah.
Because you notice Kino Lorber doesn't even promote it on the box. It doesn't say anything about Darren's voice being able to be heard
Yes.
in any of this, So it is kind of sort of this kind of hidden little gem that I wanted to put into the audio commentary. But one of the things that if you listen to that part of the interview, I say to him at that point that not only did I become a journalist because of Carl Kolchak, but other reporters had told me that. And you can hear Darren just erupt in laughter. He's so tickled by this idea that so many people became reporters because of and I told him this, at the time is that when that series premiered, when the TV series premiered, it premiered on Friday the 13th in September of 1974. Now, September 1974, where was I? I was just starting my freshman year at George Washington University and working my way towards a journalism degree. Now, George Washington University is located just a few blocks away from the White House.
Yep.
And the journalism department was a very big department at GW. So what happened in September of 1974, or what happened right before that? Well, just a few weeks before that, Richard Nixon had resigned the presidency because largely of the work of reporters pursuing the Watergate story. And the most well-known of the reporters who worked on it, although they weren't the only ones, history has sort of made it so, but Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post became sort of the faces of this. So when I started work towards my journalism degree in that September, when the series started, I was surrounded by students who wanted to be Woodward and or Bernstein. Everybody, the book had been published, All the President's Men had been published, everybody was talking about it, everybody was talking about who Deep Throat might be, everybody was just enamored of that story, so journalism departments at colleges were doing land office business at that point. And I was just surrounded by all these people who wanted to be Woodward and Bernstein, and I didn't. I wanted to be Carl Kolchak. I was starting my journalism career completely under the spell of that character. And like I say, other journalists have too. And I think in many ways, Carl Kolchak was one of the most realistic portrayals of what a reporter should be that's ever been in any movie or television show. So, and other journalists have told me this too. Since then, I've quoted several journalists in my book who told me the exact same thing. So I tell this story in the book that when I was working at the Akron Beacon Journal, I was crossing the newsroom one day. Now, this was before I had started working on the book. This was in the 1980s. But I was crossing the newsroom, and I saw our labor reporter, who was this big bear of a guy, just big guy with big shoulders, and he had a beard, and and this guy took no crap from nobody. But he was screaming at an editor. He was having one of those classic screaming matches between reporter and editor. And as I get closer and closer, his back is to me, and as I get closer, I can hear what he's saying. I'm starting to make out the words. And he's saying, he's got a copy of our newspaper, and he's waving it at the editor, and he's saying, "This is a newspaper, and we are supposed to print the news, not suppress it." It was word for word the speech that Carl yells at Tony out of Night Stalker. So I got up right behind him. And I said, "You're doing Kolchak." And he wheeled around. I thought he was going to punch me in the nose. This guy was such a, I thought he was going to turn around and I was going to see a right cross coming at me. But instead he had this grin on his face that went like, ear to ear, like an actor who had just been given a rave review. And he looks at me and he says, "You got it. You're the first person who's ever got it." I love that speech. I think that's the essence of what a reporter is. I've never forgotten that speech. That's the kind of impact that this character had on a lot of us of that generation. So I got a chance to tell Darren that. Yes, I did. And I think Darren knew less about the impact on the horror field. And he cared less about it. Darren wasn't a horror guy in essence. Right. He is by default because of this character, and it kept him out of the X-Files for a while, because they from day one they wanted to use Darren in the X-Files, and the problem was very early on. Chris Carter gave interviews, even before the show started, where he said, in no uncertain terms, that the X-Files was inspired by Night Stalker. Darren heard that, and he heard the word inspired, and he substituted the words ripped off. Never seen the show. Darren had never seen the show. Never watched an episode. And so they came to him and said, we want you to play, Mulder's father. We want you to play Senator Matheson. We want you to revise the Kolchak character. Darren like, no, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to be part of people who ripped us off? He actually used those words. And a lot of people, including me, tried to tell him, watch it. It's not what you think it is. And then finally, Darren ended up playing the Frank Black character, Lance Henriksen's character, on Millennium. He played his father on Millennium. And that show was done by the same people who had done X-Files. And this finally sort of got him to the idea of, they're not ripping us off at all. And that's when they created the character of Arthur Dales for Darren to play. He played Arthur in two episodes, and then he was shooting the third episode where he played Arthur Dales when he suffered the stroke that ended his career. And then they brought in M. Emmett Walsh to play the brother Arthur, also named Arthur Dales, to finish the episode. But Darren could have been part of it for almost from day one if he just hadn't been. Darren could be pig-headed, There's just I've already said, Darren could get an idea in his head, and it's hard to knock it out sometimes.
What a shame!
Yeah.
Well, missed opportunity. But I'm glad that he got to do that cameo, though. When I watched it, it's him. That's Carl. They made Carl change his name, but that's Carl there. It was so cool. And then
and metaphorically, he is Mulder's father. By making him the founder of the X-Files, they sort of made him Mulder's father without making him Mulder's father. It's a nice choice, and it was a nice piece of casting. And I'm glad he finally came around and did it.
Mark, what'd you think of that when they brought back the X-Files and they brought Carl Kolchak's character in?
They brought a semblance of the Kolchak character there for a few fleeting seconds there. And that was a nice homage.
Nod. Yeah.
Yes. But I also like the way they brought the X-Files back. I thought the miniseries were well done. Usually when you do those kinds of things and you get the band back together again and you try to run your old plays, it turns out to become another exercise in the night the old nostalgia burned down. But this time it those episodes were well done. They found good reasons with good character, and they had aged the characters convincingly, and yet they were the same characters. And I thought that was one of the times where they showed you could go home again.
Mark, tell us, do you do conventions? And if you do,
not for a long time. It's not my choice, by the way. I'd love to do conventions. Back in the 1990s, when the book was first published, when the Night Stalker book was first published, from 91 on, I got regular invitations to do conventions. I did the famous Monsters convention in Crystal City in the early 90s, the Fright Vision conventions in Cleveland, the Dark Shadows conventions.
Dark Shadows.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I was. The second version of the book, this one, The Night Stalker Companion, this was actually published by Pomegranate Press, which was started by Catherine Lee Scott, who played Maggie Evans on Dark Shadows. And Catherine, to this day, was a very, very dear friend. And Dark Shadows was we could spend a lot of time talking about Dark Shadows, too, because that's a show which is very influential, and I talk a lot about that in my vampire course and different things. But this was all part of this kind of continuum. Dark Shadows sort of fits into all of that, into that. But I'm sorry, you asked me a question, and I got on. You let me get off on a tangent like that, and I'll keep going. And so I'll go down the Dark Shadows there. But what did you ask, Pete?
Mark, just so that you know, when the guests come on our show, we want to hear them more than us talk, because it's important to get your subject matter out there. But I was curious to know if you had any plans for any future shows. Tell us about your book releases.
You asked about conventions. That's right. Well, no, and then I was doing conventions all the way up into the early 2000s, and then all of a sudden it stopped. The invitation stopped. And I think one thing is conventions became a lot more actor-driven, I mean, it used to be,
That's sad.
conventions were interested in having writers, and there
Right.
was always an element of that, and sort of. But I put feelers out, and I know a lot of good friends, artists and actors and such, go to the various conventions around the country, and I've put out feelers to different ones, and the invitations have never been forthcoming. Now that's not said with any petulance or whining or self pity or anything. It's just it's fine. But you asked the question, and
Right.
so no, I don't. I haven't done conventions in a long time, and but it hasn't been for. It's not like I wouldn't. I would be delighted to. I always enjoyed them immensely. As a matter of fact, after the Night Stalker book was published, the second version of it, the Night Stalker Companion, I did a few conventions where I shared a table with Jack Grinnage, who played Ron Updike on
Cool.
the Night Stalker series, and Carol Ann Susi, who played Monique Marlstein, and then went on to be the voice of Mrs. Wallowitz on The Big Bang Theory.
Oh, yeah, Mrs. Wallowitz.
Howard! That's Carol.
Oh
Carol.
my
Yep.
gosh.
Yeah. Yes. So the three of us would have, and we had a blast. We just had a ball at these doing these conventions, and so would I do it again? Yeah, and I shared a table at several horror conventions with people from Dark Shadows, from Catherine Lee Scott and Laura Parker and Marie Wallace, and different people from Dark Shadows. So I had a blast doing those, but. Like I said, I suspect that the convention world has changed a bit,
Yeah.
since my dad. Those
Right.
things, and again, I'm not saying this with. I really want to be careful about this, because this really isn't. There's not even the least bit of resentment or petulance. But if you're lucky to live long enough, you're also going to see certain parades pass you by. It's just going to happen.
Really good.
It's just
Really good
going
words.
to happen.
Yep.
And in some ways it's good. In the past a year or so, a year or 2 years, there've been like 4 or 5 books done on Columbo.
Wow.
That have come out, and now a couple of them have been academic studies, but there've been a couple of popular books that have come out, and they're excellent. They're both excellent. David Koenig's Shooting Columbo, and another one by a blogger who uses the name of my book, The Columbo File. He did a book called The Columbo Companion, and they both went deeper into aspects of the series that I had done in my original book. And somebody asked me a while ago, how did I feel about that? I said, I'm delighted. I'm absolutely delighted that if I had ended up writing the one and only book that ever was written about Columbo, I would have failed. It would have meant that there was nothing beyond that this universe was so closed that one book would suffice.
Yep.
And you look at all the books that have been written on Sherlock Holmes, or all the books that have been written on Star Trek, or all the books that have been written on various pop culture entities. You mean there's not room for one more book on Columbo? Or there's not, a matter of fact, a professor at Syracuse University just published a book on Night Stalker, Kendall Phillips.
Yes.
Yes. I'm so delighted to see it. I mean, I was very supportive of it. I was very, so
I'm sure Pete has
even
it.
as you sort of see this, there's there's Kendall, and you see that, and you say, there is an aspect to that to say, well, it's you are passing the torch. You are sort of saying, okay, if I carry the torch for that long, and then the torch goes out, you fail.
Exactly.
If somebody else does not pick up that torch at some point, then what you did ultimately didn't work.
Right. If you
And
haven't,
the light just goes out.
I think if you haven't
And that
inspired
can-
other fans,
Right.
yep,
Exactly.
that's always the problem. That's what we're, that's what we like to look
and
at
that
is
can be applied-
fans feel the
Yeah,
flame.
you
so,
apply that to everything.
Yep.
All shows and all the genres and all of these movies. So Mark, I gotta ask you, what's your favorite? Pick your, I mean, you've heard this 1,000 times, but we haven't. Your favorite episodes from the series?
Well, my two favorite, I think the two episodes that chart up and are the closest to what the movies was Horror in the Heights because it has a great idea. The Rakshasa, which is an Indian spirit,
Ooh, yeah.
that comes to you, India, the country India, uh, spirit, uh, it comes to you in the form of the person you trust most. In other words, it could be your mother, it could be your best friend, it could be a teacher, your mentor. It comes to you in that form, and it comes to kill you. That's a great idea. That is a fantastic. That would be just one of those. That's one of those ideas. And great ideas in horror are hen's teeth. Most horror ideas are iterations of the ideas already done. That is a great idea, and that was an original idea. And the other one is the Spanish Moss Murders with the
Okay.
Bayou Monster. I think those two are very good. They're very funny episodes. They have a kind of a serious subtext to them, but I think they're the two that sort of blend that formula of what is Kolchak when it works the best.
Mark, I'm going to tell you two of my favorites, and they're more or less because of my childhood watching. Um, the Nightly Murders and Bad Medicine are my guilty pleasures, along with, of course, The Youth Killer. I happen to be, Greek American, so The Youth Killer kind of strikes a chord with me in terms of the whole backstory to that. But
And I like the
I
Nightly
know that.
Murders too. I think that's a very good series. That is also John Dehner is a very John Dehner was wonderful in everything.
Oh yeah,
Is that
oh yeah,
if you sort of look at the three books that I've written series on, uh, The Twilight Zone, Night Stalker, and Columbo, there are actually very few actors who have actually appeared on all three of those. If you sort of say, there's a lot of actors who appeared on two of them. Like
right.
William Shatner was in Columbo and he's in The Twilight Zone, but he was never in A Night
Right on.
Stalker. So there's a lot of actors who appeared in two of those, but very few people did what I would call hitting for the cycle, and that's my cycle of having appeared on all three of the series that I've written books about. Well, John Dehner's one of them. He's in wonderful episodes of The Twilight Zone. He's in two episodes of the original Columbo, and he's in The Nightly Murders as Captain Vernon Roush, and he's just wonderful in that episode. James Gregory is another actor who appeared in all three, but very few actors actually appeared in all three. You would think that would be a bigger group, but it isn't.
Eric, there's Mark. We have a question from Eric Padden, who's actually who is an academic and is an author and writes a lot of fan fiction. And he says, or he asks, was there a rights issue that prevented the vampire episode from being identified explicitly as a sequel to the original movie? Because
No.
it's kind of implied that
Yeah,
Scorsese,
that it's Scorsese progeny.
yeah,
That no,
yeah,
no, no, no. I've seen it. There wasn't. There really was no, because you've got to remember this was, even though there were separate entities doing. ABC produced the two movies and Universal did the series. These were two very chummy companies, and the series was airing on ABC, and that would have been 1, 2, 3, to have cleared that. So no, there was no. There were other rights issues that plagued Night Stalker, that right from the start. Not the least of which was the fact that Universal and ABC had failed to get Jeff Rice's sequel rights secured when they went ahead and did the series, which made the series
Ooh.
illegal.
What?
So,
Oh,
and Jeff
wow.
did everything he could to resolve it, and then finally he threatened a lawsuit. He was immediately banned from the lot. He was immediately banned from having anything to do with this. Story is told in my book in great and painful detail. But finally, the suit was settled on the day it was going to go through, and Jeff was awarded. This turned out to be one of the most fortuitous things in all. Jeff was awarded rights that Universal and ABC at the time felt were worthless because this was a failed series. And back then, when a series failed, they junked everything. They sold off everything. The studios and networks are not sentimental operations. So when Night Stalker, when the suit was settled, Jeff was awarded literary rights, which meant he could control whatever was done from a publishing standpoint on Kolchak going forward, fiction and nonfiction, and certain gaming and merchandising rights, which Universal and ABC thought, who's ever going to care about merchandising rights for a failed series, for a series that there was only 20 episodes for? So those rights remained with Jeff, and that allowed him to authorize not only the Kolchak novels like Grave Secrets, but then the whole Moonstone comic book series, which was started in the early 2000s and has been going now for almost 20 years. And they've done hundreds of stories, prose stories and comic book stories. And that's because Jeff got the literary rights. So although the rights to Kolchak are very split up, I mean, they're very clear. They're very clear. Whenever anybody says, well, nobody can understand what the rights are, no, I'll explain them to you. They're very easy to understand. ABC owns ABC, which is now Disney. Disney owns ABC. So when they bought ABC, they bought the entity which was known as ABC Circle Films, which owned the dramatic rights to Kolchak. Dramatic rights means television and movies. So if you want to make a television show or a movie about Carl Kolchak, it has to be done through Disney now, because Disney owns that. That's what they own. Universal owns the 20 episodes they made for the series. That's it. That's all they own.
Wow.
Those 20 episodes. And then Jeff Rice, now Jeff's heir and son James Rice, controls the literary and merchandising rights for Kolchak. But people will say, why haven't there been action figures for Kolchak? I would really like an action figure. And I said, okay, well, what would you like? I want the Rakshasha from Hard and Ice. Okay. Well, you're going to have to get Universal to sign off on that. You're going to have to get Disney to sign off on that. And you're going to have to get the rights to sign off on that. It's like most entities, are owned. Things that worked in Kolchak's advantage also work against it. So while we can have novels and comic books afresh, because there's no one entity saying, no, you can't do that, or give us $1 million and you can do it. That way is clear. But other things are blocked. It's like on the Columbo side. If you look at Columbo, it's very easy. Columbo, everything that's Columbo is owned lock, stock, and barrel by NBC Universal, the entity which is now NBC Universal. Because when Levinson and Link, who created the character, did the original movie, they sold the whole shebang to Universal. So Universal controls it completely. They control everything. They control gaming, merchandising, syndication, anything, dramatic rights. Anything that's Columbo, you got to go to Universal. Okay, easy enough.
Wow.
Kolchak, they're all over the map, because of the lawsuit.
Well, Mark, I know that your books that are in print are on Amazon. I'm not sure if you do anything on your own personal website. Is there a link to Amazon?
That'll take you to Amazon. That's promotional.
Okay.
The website is just to sort of one-stop shopping as far as things go. But you had in the beginning it shown the graphic there and said there's a book on this. You said versatile. I think the word you were looking for was schizophrenic. It is definitely a bizarre mixture of titles.
It's awesome. I love it.
There's theater history. There's Theodore Roosevelt. There's Dracula. There's a literary biography. There's television stuff. There's Columbo. There's mystery, and there's five of the books are on Mark Twain. And I was once at a book fair, and I had a bunch of my books on a table, and a guy went by and he did like a double take. And he looked at him, and he looked just puzzled. And he finally looked up at me, and the only thing he said was, "I don't get it." And I said, "Well, what don't you understand?" He said, "I don't understand. What's the common theme here?" And I looked at him, I said, "Me. I'm the common theme."
Yeah, exactly.
These are all my interests. These are all my, I don't like repeating myself. I don't like, I like new challenges. And I don't, the next book is on Edgar Allan Poe. And some people might say, aha, see, he's back to the horror field here. He's doing Poe. Well, one of the things I did the book for was to sort of destroy the myth that Poe was just a horror guy. Poe was not. Poe was an extraordinarily gifted, dedicated, and versatile writer. He wrote as much humor as he did horror. It's just that we don't read the humor anymore. The humor hasn't dated as well. The horror stuff is great, was great, still great. In Poe's time, Poe was known primarily by the American public as a literary critic. That's how he was primarily known. His criticism was, he was a very fierce critic. He was so fierce as a critic, he earned the nickname the Tomahawk Man.
Wow.
That's how, because at a time when people just were puffing American literature and saying, you know, well, if it's American literature, it must be good. He was saying, if we do not bring standards to this, we'll never stand shoulder to shoulder with the British and the French as a literary judge. So he was bringing standards to it, and he paid a price for that. But he was primarily known as a critic. Secondarily, he was known as a poet. You know, and third, he was known as a writer of mystery and horror tales. Now we, in our time, have reversed that order. We know him primarily as the purveyor of horror tales first, and then mystery. Then as a poet. Raven, Annabelle Lee, then as a critic. So we reversed the order in which he was known. But behind all that has grown a mythology of this kind of gloomy, melancholy guy sitting in an attic, writing out stories with a raven perched on his shoulder and a bottle of cognac. That's not who he was. That's not in any way, shape, or form who he was. He, you know, he had an absolute horror of being typed. And you know, if you had said to Edgar Allan Poe, "Oh, you're a horror writer," not only would he have denied it, he wouldn't have known what the term meant. Because nobody, if you look at all the leading people who progressed horror in the 1800s, so maybe, what's the Mount Rushmore of horror? Mary Shelley, Edgar Allan Poe, Robert Louis Stevenson, and Bram Stoker. Those four write the seminal works that move horror into the modern era. Not one of them thought of themselves as a horror writer. They just thought, well, today I'm writing horror. Maybe today I'm writing a story of horror. But, you know, like Robert Louis Stevenson, well, today I'm writing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but tomorrow I'm writing Treasure Island. And the next day I'm going to write A Child's Garden of Verses. And the next day I'm going to write Kidnapped, or a book of essays about travel or whatever. Poe is the same way. Poe wrote, we only lived to be 40 years old. And his combined works fill 17 volumes. It's an immense output for somebody who only lived to be 40 years old.
40 years old, yeah.
And only a small fraction of that is horror. Only that much of it is horror. So when people say, now it's very influential horror. Now I'm not saying he wasn't good at what he did, and he is
popular
the grandfather of horror. But the truth is, Poe never thought of himself that way. Poe never would have thought of, he probably would have said, yeah, I'm good at it. I'm really good at it. And he would have viewed it as one quiver. But the idea of typing a writer by genre is a 20th century American conceit. It didn't exist in the 19th. You were just a writer. And if writing a story as a spooky story was the best way to tell the story, that's the way you wrote it. American publishing, especially in the second half of the 20th century, when you say you're a writer, the first question people say, well, what kind of writer are you? There are kinds? Well, yes. Yep. Are you a horror writer? Are you a mystery writer? Are you a romance writer? Are you a biographer? Are you a sports writer? Everything has to be typed now. You have to be branded like music. You have to be branded a certain type of thing. Well, writer in the 1900s, the 1800s would have believed that, would have followed that. So that's kind of my way of thinking, is that I love horror. I love the horror field. I'm always going to slip back into it. But I've always followed where my interests are. My interests are not confined to that. So, which is why I'm always wrong about what the next book is, I know, Poe is going to be the next book because it's done and it's about to be published. It'll be published on Valentine's Day.
Are you sure?
Well, This tells me yes.
Outstanding,
This
outstanding.
tells me that
Outstanding.
the book is at the printer now. So yeah, I mean and there's a certain part of me, by the way, that says I don't believe it till I hold it. You know,
Yeah.
but we've gotten so far down we've gotten so far down the track. But now, if you were to ask me what the next book is going to be, I will be wrong. I don't even venture to say anything.
I'm sure it'll
You know,
drop in your lap, Mark. But unlike Carl's work that would be seen by few, we're lucky that we have a nice representation tonight on our live feed, and we are lucky that we have a successful syndicated show that sometimes reaches in the tens of thousands. And so we appreciate your time. It's been an honor and a pleasure, Mark, to have you on IFB and talking about our beloved Kolchak. We would love to have you back. It's an open door policy. If there's anything coming up, or if you're available, we would definitely like to have you come back.
well, two things. One is if you wanted me to come back and talk Poe with you when the book comes out,
Oh,
he's endlessly
yes.
fascinating. But I'll say something else which we did not touch on, and we probably should say, which is I do know in essence sort of what the next book is going to be, but not because it's a new book, but I am working on a new edition of the Kolchak book.
Oh.
The
What?
companion.
Ooh,
Yes.
ooh.
That book will, the goal is to have that out in September. I wanted it to
Oh
be
boy.
out for the 50th anniversary,
Right.
but anniversaries are they're kind of overdone and they're kind of pat. Everybody sort of aims for where anniversaries are. And as I said to the publisher, I'd rather do this right than make some artificial deadline just because it's an anniversary. And, it's not like anybody is anything less of a Kolchak fan because it's the 51st anniversary instead of the 50th anniversary.
Exactly.
It's not
Yeah.
like all of a sudden the calendar is going to say 2023. Well, I can't buy that book now. It's not the 50th anniversary. How can I
Right.
be a fan now? You're still a fan, and it's still, as a matter of fact, I have suggested we call it the 51st anniversary companion. I said, let's put the actual number on there
Yeah.
and just,
It's a little comedy on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was, and the other reason is because the Poe book had to come first. I mean, I was contractually obligated to deliver that to St. Martin's, and you can't have competing books out at the same time. Contractually, you can't do that. So Kolchak sort of had to wait, and so we're thinking of the fall of next year for that. And
Oh,
there will be new
fantastic.
material. There's going to be, reprinting the original, the '97 version, but with new material on
No.
Oh,
about
wow.
the Moonstone stuff, the failed 2005 series, different things. Just it'll be updated, But the more importantly, it was published in '97. It stayed in print 10 years, which is a good run for a book. If a book stays in
Oh,
print for
yeah.
10 years, that's a very good run. So up to 2007, you could buy that book for its cover price, which what was the cover for 1995. So you could buy this book for 1995 anywhere up to that, 2007. As soon as it went out of print, the prices started to go up.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And one reason was because Kolchak fans held on to it. In other words, this
Yep.
was not widely available at a garage sale near you. This was a book which was difficult to find, and the prices started to creep up and up and up. And finally, a publisher sort of convinced me we should at least reprint it at a reasonable price so Kolchak fans can get it and afford it at a reasonable price. I said, well, if we're going to reprint it, we should at least put new material into it to sort of update the story. So the target date for that is going to be September of next year. And
Great.
We look forward
that's
to it.
the
Fantastic. So we got a scoop. Thank you very, very much, Mark. It's been my distinct pleasure since I've been a fan of your work and of Kolchak for decades. Thank you so much for taking the time out. And I will continue to indoctrinate my best friend here, Chris, and eventually get him to watch the series, which I know he'll get a kick out of one way or the other. And we look forward to you revisiting. So we're gonna pencil it in, and we will definitely have you back.
Well, I'm a hard guy to get. You have to ask me, you know. So,
Fantastic. Consider yourself asked, Mark. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Appreciated all the insights and everything else. Like I said, I'm a fan, and most of our listeners as well. And so you keep doing what you're doing, and we look forward to your work.
Yep.
okay,
Mark,
sounds great. Well, thanks again for having me.
Mark, here's to you.
You got it. This is yep.
It's great to
Cheers, Mark.
see a person.
I'm using my Twilight Zone mug here, but
that's
okay.
fine. It's great to have a person who continues the trug or trog through all of the problems that people see in regards to other shows and not having a good following. Like, you know, the Kolchak didn't have a great following, but you're still there for the fans. So you're a super fan because you're a fan of the fans creating the show. Does that make sense?
Well, you know, and I'll say this too. I'll leave this on one thought. You know, it's just I told this in the Twilight Zone book. There's a chapter in the Twilight Zone book where I applied this as a message. That when I was at George Washington University and I was getting to the point where I was in my senior year, I had that moment of stress and anxiety that everybody has in their senior, like, you know, okay, I got to this point. Will I ever work? Will I ever, you know? So at that point, all I wanted to do was to make my living as a writer. It's all I wanted. And if Rod Serling had appeared behind me at that moment, in like a classic Twilight Zone moment, and said, here is a contract. You sign this right now, and you are guaranteed that for the rest of your life, you will make your living writing. How fast do you think I would have moved to sign that contract? I was, please, okay, I'll sign. He said, no, wait, hold it.
Do you know really what you're signing?
What if, that's what the contract says. You can sign it right now if you want to, but what if that meant writing manuals for putting blenders together? What if that was the job and you had to do that the rest of your life? So let me make this a little bit better for you. Let's guarantee you that you will forever be able to make a living writing, but writing about what you love, about television, movies, show business, theater. You will be able to do that. Okay, please, let me sign now. Let me sign. I will sign now. Hold it. Wait a minute. It gets better. What if we add a clause here that says you'll have your first book published by the time you're 26? Okay. Please let me sign. We could have kept going. My point is that everything has been better. You know, you're looking at somebody who has been incredibly fortunate, but you're only incredibly fortunate if you know it, if you understand it. There are a lot of people who you look at who have fortune has shown, and they're miserable people.
Yep.
And you cannot tell them they're happy or that they're supposed to be happy. If you're miserable, you're miserable. And if you're, you know, my point is, I have been incredibly fortunate, but one of the most fortunate things is that I have been given the ability to realize it and appreciate it. I have been the beneficiary of all of this. So you're looking at, you know, one lucky son of a gun, and he knows it. So I thank you for that, but, you know, you're rewarded for pursuing your passions, and that's what I've done.
And you have
so
done
guys,
as well,
that.
sir.
Thank you, Mark.
Here's to you, Mark.
Take care.
Unbelievable. So cool.
Wow. I think I could have stayed
Guys,
another hour or
thank
two
you
to
for-
listen to him.
Oh my God, so cool. Andrew Carruthers, thanks for joining us live. Cheers to you and everybody else that are watching us live. I know Baz from Australia tuned in for a little bit. I know our usual suspects were on from all over the United States and around the world. We thank you, and we thank everybody that's going to watch this in reruns and syndication. We appreciate your support, guys, wherever you may be around the world. Chris, I think we had a good one. You know, we haven't.
It was amazing.
It's been a while.
Totally
It's been
amazing.
a while that we. And this is definitely one of them. And everybody everybody that knows me and everybody that's been watching, as well as yourself, Chris, you know
Yeah.
that I am a huge Carl Kolchak fan.
I want to go.
And
I want to go sign up for his class on vampires. What are you talking about? I just want to know about the different
I,
vampires and why they were
oh yeah,
portrayed different ways. I mean, like I said, I could listen to this guy for hours.
I
Mark
wanted
was
to try to
amazing.
take one of his classes, but it just wasn't going to happen between work and everything else. I was like dying when I found out he was teaching. I was like, what the heck? But yeah, well, guys, thank you very much for tuning in and supporting. Right, it was a fantastic interview, and we got so much insight. And we'll have him back. He'll come back. Mark will come back, and really enjoyed that. Chris, I hope I can talk you into watching the episodes. I imagine you will
What
enjoy.
are they
Um,
available on something?
they're on TV. As a matter of fact, Mary, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Lola mentioned that she's been watching them on Saturdays. And Andrew
Huh.
says, "Why is?" Oh, wait, hold on, Andrew. I think you put something up on the schedule. Let me see. Looks like Stephen McCormick says looks like Kolchak is on the NBC app free too,
Oh,
so you can see him on there. It's
I'm
the
gonna
NBC
check him
app.
out.
Yeah, yeah.
He's
Oh,
got
it'd
to
be
be more.
cool.
He's got to be more interesting than 1899 or whatever it was.
Well, I'll tell you. Yeah, the episode. You're gonna like the episodes are cool, right? They're the whole little monster of the week thing is
Yeah.
encapsulated, and it's kind of fun because it's all about how Carl takes on all of these situations, and he becomes this folk hero looking back. That's basically Darren McGavin's words, but I think you'll enjoy them. 1899 is a whole different. It's not what you think it is. It's like I told you. If for those of you that have seen Life on Mars, the American version, that's more or less what 1899 is. And if
Hmm.
you don't know either one, yeah, you
Nope.
just kind of stick with it a little bit. Paul says that some of the episodes might be on YouTube. I'm not
Hmm.
sure, but listen, we're looking forward to all of you joining us again next week. I will be on a
Special.
sabbatical,
Yep. Special guest.
special assignment.
You're on special guest. We'll have a special guest
Yep.
broadcaster,
Yes, we can
podcaster.
have a
Yeah.
guest co-host.
Co-host.
So yeah, guest co-host. Mediocre Modeler will be filling in. I will be on a sabbatical for the next show. But you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We love having everybody on. It's always a pleasure to share our passions with you guys
Yep.
because we grew up watching this stuff,
Yeah.
and it's really a lot of fun, being able to share with all of you because, as Chris would say, Chris says a lot of times, and I'm sure those of you I'm going to say it again, you've heard it before, but um, Chris and I be on here talking to ourselves if it wasn't for you guys, but we really appreciate it. Seattle signing off. That's Paul, Commander Kane. Thank you so much, and Chris.
Yeah. So I know we didn't get into Mork and Mindy tonight, but we'll catch up next broadcast. We've gone a little over, so we want to make sure that everybody gets their sleep and everything else. But we really
Yep.
appreciate you coming out. And Mark, if you're still listening, wow is all I got to say. Thank you for joining us. And once again, it's great to have you on the show because it's like a person who's a fan of a fandom who creates stuff for fans. So, I mean, somebody who creates all that stuff for fans you've done a great job, and we really appreciate it, and we thankful that we had you on the show. So, anyways, I guess that brings us to the end tonight, and we want to, like I said, join us next week. We are available on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Twitch and
Twitch,
whatever else you want to do. But you can
Spotify.
always Spotify. You can find us there for all of that. Please join us. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, please hit the thumbs up and the like things because it does make a difference And of course, follow on Facebook and follow on YouTube as well. It does make a difference. It helps us in regards to getting to different Comic-Cons and having them believe us that we're actually somebody who they would want to let us in regards to finding out information. So, you got anything else, Pete?
No, just stay safe, everybody. See you at our next show. Keep the faith. And Chris, as you always say,
Yep. Fans feel the fleet.
fans feel the fleet. Here's to you guys and to Mark. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Take care. Mork and Mindy, next show.
Yep.
Take care.
And happy birthday, Bubbles.
Suicide